Chapter 129. Renbochin felt uneasy as he followed behind the Empress to Qingxin Palace Hall. He wasn't from this world, but it was after all a different world. Could he really practice the martial arts of this world? If he couldn't, he would be in big trouble. Not only could he not practice martial arts, but he also had to reach the earth will level. If he couldn't practice martial arts, how would the Empress treat him? "Are you very nervous?" the Empress, who was walking in front, asked without turning her head. "A little, but I don't know if I can practice it," Renbochin said bluntly. "If it's not here, I will go somewhere else to get it for you." A cold voice traveled to Renbochin's ears. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't touched. This was not something that could be said casually. Even if she was the Empress of Dao, the only martial arts that were suitable for Renbochin were the martial arts of the other three nations. Even if the emperor of the other nations gave the order, they might not even hand over the martial arts manuals with both hands. Furthermore, it wasn't even close. How could he get it? He could only use a knife to get it. He could only send people from Dao to the other nations to snatch it. The difficulty of doing so was imaginable. Countless heads fell to the ground. Whether it was the aboriginals or the people from the other nations, it was the same. How could Renbochin not be touched by the Empress's words? "I am really frightened to receive such treatment from your Majesty," Renbochin said from behind. "Just do your job well." The Empress didn't care. Qingxin Palace Hall was still the same as before. Lin Qiaola was still sleeping soundly. When she heard someone enter, she looked up and saw the Empress. In a panic, she pushed the table over and stood up. The sound of the table falling to the ground wasn't soft, especially in such an empty environment. "Your Majesty." Lin Qiaola quickly greeted. Then, she saw Renbochin looking at her with a smile behind the Empress. She immediately widened her eyes. "Don't be so flustered," the Empress said and continued to walk forward. Renbochin could tell that the Empress was very tolerant of Lin Qiaola. Lin Qiaola stuck out her tongue at the back and obediently caught up with him. "Your Majesty." The old woman on the second floor stood up to welcome the Empress. "Librarian Lin, find a suitable martial arts manual for him. You have a better understanding of the second level." As the Empress spoke, she turned around slightly and revealed Renbochin. When Librarian Lin raised her head, there was a flash of light in her eyes. It was as if she had seen through Renbochin. Renbochin felt a chill in his heart. He thought to himself that this old lady's gaze was actually so terrifying. It was almost like a knife. This old lady wants to see which one is suitable for him. Supervisor Lin said to the Empress. She took a few steps forward and placed her hand on Renbochin's shoulder. With a slight movement of her fingers, Renbochin suddenly lost control of his body and followed the direction of her finger to turn his body. Librarian Lin reached out her hand and began to feel his bones from the back of his head. She moved his spine down section by section. After a while, she turned around and said, "Your Majesty, his body is too weak, and he is old. He has also lost his yuanyang. If he wants to practice, there is only one, visualization, in this hall." When Librarian Lin said that Renbochin had lost his yuanyang, Renbochin felt Qin Yuan, Hong Yuan, Xinjie, and Lin Qiaola looking at him. This made him extremely embarrassed. This visualization starts with visualization. First, you have to observe yourself. After reaching this step, you have to supplement your body with medicinal herbs. After that, you have to strengthen your body. This isn't easy to get started. It requires a clear mind. If it's him, his mind will be in a mess. From this old lady's point of view, it will be difficult for him to achieve anything. A mess of mind. This evaluation was indeed accurate. Modern people came into contact with too much information and too many desires. Naturally, their minds would be in a mess and difficult to be clear. Even Renbochin had to nod his head and admit that this old lady's eyes were indeed sharp. Librarian Lin changed the topic and said, on the first floor, there is a Great Pan Quan. An ordinary person can barely reach the so-called earth level by using it. If it's him, I'm afraid it's already not bad if he can reach the man level. Is it possible to nourish the blood and refine the marrow? The Empress asked. Librarian Lin looked at Renbochin and shook her head slightly. His body's bones are already set. Unless he can repair himself, even if he expends a large amount of effort to nourish the blood and refine the marrow, he can only reach the threshold of the earth will level. It will be extremely difficult for him to advance further. If he wants to repair the minute parts of his body, he needs to have complete control over his body. Only the revisualization can do that. There are only these 2 books in the entire Qingxin Palace Hall, the Empress frowned and asked. Only these 2 books are suitable for him, Librarian Lin said bluntly. After hearing this, Renbochin understood that the first book was actually the best. If he could master it, it wouldn't have much of an impact. However, his mind was in a mess and it would be difficult for him to master it. Even though he could practice the second book and could get started with it, his body's foundation was too weak and it would be difficult for him to achieve anything. However, not only was Librarian Lin's eyes sharp, she was even able to remember the pros and cons of the countless martial arts manuals in Qingxin Palace Hall. She only needed to look at his body's condition to know which martial arts was suitable for him. With so many martial arts manuals, even a photographic memory would be difficult to achieve. No wonder the Empress was very polite to Librarian Lin. With this kind of strength, no matter where she went, she would receive courteous treatment. Renbochin saw that the Empress was deep in thought and said, Your Majesty, I would like to ask if the revisualization can be successful if one's mind is clear. You can only get started if your mind is clear and transparent. As for what happens after that, it still depends on you, the old woman looked at him and said. My original intention was to let you practice that great pan boxing. First, nourish the blood and refine the marrow to strengthen your foundation. Then, after you reach the upper levels of the man level, I will think of other methods for you. What do you think? The Empress said to Renbochin. Lin Chaola opened her mouth slightly and formed an O shape. The Empress had personally brought him to find a martial arts manual for him. It was already a great kindness. She actually asked for his opinion. Did the Empress think so highly of him? In fact, what happened that day had almost spread throughout the palace. She was the only one who didn't know anything as she lay there sleeping every day. However, even though Qing Yuan, Hong Yuan, and Xianzhe were clear about the matter, they still felt that the Empress treated Renbochin differently. If it was someone else, why would the Empress spend so much effort to pave the way for him? Your Majesty, allow me to consult Librarian Lin. May I know how long it takes for a person with a clear mind to get started with revisualization? Also, what is the standard for a person with a clear mind? Renbochin asked. A clear and transparent mind without any distracting thoughts. It only takes 1 day of comprehension and 1 month of comprehension. This martial arts manual only requires a clear mind and doesn't have high requirements for other things. It's just that not many people can do this, Supervisor Lin said. I am willing to give it a try for 2 months. If it doesn't work, I will change to another method. I seek your Majesty's permission, Renbochin said to the Empress. If you want to give it a try, then go ahead. I will see if there are any other methods within these 2 months. The Empress nodded her head. After all, Renbochin came from another world. Since he made such a request, perhaps he had his own methods. At the same time, she could also make use of this time to prepare and see if there were any other methods. The others were somewhat moved. Under such circumstances, the Empress was still thinking of ways to help Renbochin. This kind of favor was really generous. The reality was indeed as the Empress had thought. Renbochin knew that he was just an ordinary person. It was as difficult as ascending to heaven to achieve a clear mind. However, the idea of having a clear mind made him think of two religions. Taoism and Buddhism had great attainments in the cultivation of the mind. Perhaps he could seek guidance from them first. Perhaps he would gain something. Chapter 130. After leaving Qingxin Palace Hall, Renbochin returned to Pingle Park. When he came back, he found out the name of this courtyard after asking around. After entering the house, he closed the door and opened the windows. Then, he sat in front of the table and placed a thick book made of animal hide on the table. He was a little excited. After all, this was a martial arts manual from this world, and it should be of a very high grade. Otherwise, it wouldn't be placed on the second floor. This wasn't the 10 palms of the subduing dragon that could be found in a street stall. He didn't know what kind of leather the book was made of. It gave off a feeling that it was very old and had experienced many years. However, the book wasn't damaged or even worn out. Renbochin carefully opened the book. On the first page, there was a drawing of a lake. Some of the surrounding corners could be seen as land, as well as some scattered weeds and trees. Although it was just a few strokes, the charm was completely outlined. It was as if a gust of water vapor was blowing against his face. There was a line of small words below. However, after looking at it for a long time, Renbochin could only recognize one word. If he didn't guess wrongly, it should be water. After all, there were many similarities between hieroglyphs. However, he was at a loss for the other words. Every word was like a drawing. The Empress didn't ask about his progress, and he had forgotten about it. Seems like I still have to learn how to read. At least I have to find someone to translate this book. Renbochin pondered and flipped a few pages. On the second page, there were many small words. On the third page, there was a forest. On the fourth page, there were many more small words. Renbochin continued to flip to the next page. It was a page of pictures and a page of words. There were a total of 9 pictures. After the 18th page, there were 5 or 6 pages full of words. The last page was another picture. Forget it, I can't understand anything. If I can learn it just by looking at pictures, then it's simply a joke. Renbochin carried the book and went to Qingxin Palace Hall. This re-visualization shouldn't be a problem for Lin Qiaola to read, but not for other people. Therefore, he still had to look for that girl who was always sleeping. With the token that the Empress threw at him that day, he wouldn't be affected by most places in the palace as long as he didn't get lost. Occasionally, he would meet maids along the way. They would look at Renbochin curiously before quickly leaving. After all, this was the first time they encountered such a situation. They didn't know what to do and could only keep a distance. When he opened the door of Qingxin Palace Hall, Lin Qiaola was still dozing off and her face was plastered on the table. Apart from the few days when Renbochin was learning how to read, she would sleep for at least 20 hours out of the 24 hours a day. It was to be expected that she would be like this. Renbochin knocked on the table a few times to wake her up. When she realized it was Renbochin, she immediately yawned again. With an unhappy look on her face, she asked, "What are you doing here again?" "School," Ren said, Renbochin of Lin of Palace Hall. Ren has school. Is. Lin is. Lin. You've been missing for so many days, and I've only dared to eat 2 pieces a day. If you hadn't come back, I would have gone looking for you. Lin Qiaola was rather happy to receive sweets and do things for him. She didn't even sleep and continued to translate for him until evening. After 3 days of running around Qingxin Palace Hall, Renbochin finally understood the re-visualization. In this technique, the human body was divided into 5 elements. Therefore, one could enter the ethereal realm by using one of the 5 elements. The first 5 pictures were a lake, a mountain, a forest, a flame, and a sword. Then, one could observe one's body in the ethereal realm, master one of the 5 elements, and complete this meridian. This was only the entry level. Mastering the 5 elements meant mastering all the mysteries of the body. Then, one could reach the peak of the man-will level and step into the earth-will level. After that, one could continue to cultivate by visualizing a deity called Mother Earth. Then, one could sense the earth meridian and reach the peak of the earth-will level. It could be said that the most difficult part of this technique was the entry level. As long as one could enter the entry level, one would be able to reach the earth embryo level. There were 2 disadvantages to this technique. One of them was that this technique was different from most other techniques in the world. Other techniques focused on the external to the internal or both at the same time. This technique focused on the internal to the external. During cultivation, a large number of medicinal herbs were required to complete the 5 elements, thereby transforming one's body. The variety of rare medicinal herbs required to practice this technique wasn't insignificant. At the same level, the various resources consumed were more than 10 times that of others. The second disadvantage was that a normal technique would transform one's blood essence into qi. There was qi in one's body, but this technique was completely different. It didn't have the means to transform blood essence into qi. It seemed to be specialized in transforming and strengthening one's body. The third disadvantage was that the actual combat ability of this technique was completely trash. Other than allowing one's body to reach the earth-will level, there was almost no actual combat ability. Even at the earth-will level, one could only rely on one's body to suppress a man-will practitioner. It could be said that one was the weakest among those at the same level. Furthermore, because there was no qi, even if he learned other techniques, he wouldn't be able to execute them. When Rinpoche first found out about this characteristic, he thought that practicing this technique would allow him to become as strong as the Aboriginals. However, Lin Chala's words dispelled his thoughts. This was because the Aboriginals actually stimulated and unearthed the power of their bloodlines to achieve breakthroughs in their bodies. It could be said that this technique was completely different from the current techniques. It was completely unconventional. As for the techniques after the Earth embryo realm, according to the description, it was on the last diagram, which was also a visualization diagram. The diagram depicted a ferocious-looking man with 18 arms. Rinpoche couldn't tell what the Earth embryo realm would be like. He reckoned that he would only know after cultivating to that stage and visualizing that diagram. According to Lin Chala's reply to librarian Lin, this re-visualization was found in the library of the Hao Nation's royal family. Even in the Hao Nation, no one had practiced this technique before. It was difficult to get started with this technique. Not only did it consume a lot of energy, but one would also be the weakest among those at the same level and could only rely on one's physical strength to bully others. What was the point of practicing this technique? After all, those who could enter the Hao Nation's library would not lack techniques. Do you still want to practice this? Lin Chala asked casually as she ate her candy. Rinpoche was a little hesitant. These few days, he more or less understood some things from Lin Chala's words. Martial arts weren't cabbages, it wasn't like choosing a major in a university, and it wasn't something that could be changed after a few years of practice. For other martial arts, if one reached a certain level, such as attaining the earth-will level, one could change to a compatible martial art. However, this re-visualization was different. It was different from all the other martial arts. Even if one wanted to change it, one couldn't. If he chose it, he would have to walk on this path until the end. As for what would happen after the pinnacle of the earth-will level, no one knew. It was completely unknown. If he didn't choose this technique, he would have to practice Great Pan boxing first. Then, he would have to wait for the Empress to find another martial art for him. One could imagine the difficulty of this task. There were so many books in the entire Qingxin Palace Hall. After inheriting the original library of the Han Nation, there were still many books that were added later on. Yet, only 2 books were suitable for him. If he were to search elsewhere, would he be able to find a suitable one in a short period of time? And in the process of searching, how big of a storm would he create? Even if the Empress was willing, he didn't dare to let her do this. With this thought, Renbochin felt that he had no other choice. He could only choose this revisualization and walk on this path until the end. The prerequisite was that he could get started with it. As for combat power, he simply didn't consider it at all. He wasn't going to fight for no reason. If he was weaker than others, then so be it. At the very least, he would be stronger than his current self. Furthermore, there were rifles, grenades, RPGs, and all kinds of lethal weapons on Earth. Chapter 131. In the main hall, the Empress was sitting upright. After a while, Hongwu strode into the hall. "Greetings, Your Majesty. Give the General-in-Chief who supports the nation a seat of honor." Just as the Empress finished speaking, someone moved a chair over and placed it behind Hongwu. "When will the General-in-Chief who supports the nation set off?" the Empress asked. Hongwu would return at this time every year and return to the north after the Empress's birthday celebration. It had almost become a routine over the past few years. "I am relieved to see that Your Majesty is safe and sound." "I will set off tomorrow," Hongwu said. "It has been hard on you, General. You have been guarding the borders for many years. It's a pity that there is no one to replace you." "Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty. I am used to it. Furthermore, there are good places at the borders where we can see snow occasionally in winter." Hongwu laughed heartily. "That scenery is very beautiful. I want to see it too." After finishing this sentence, the Empress added, "When the General-in-Chief attacks Great Xia, I will also go there to see the snow." Hongwu laughed heartily again upon hearing this. If Great Xia was ready, he would wait until he repelled the Great Xia army before attacking and occupying the city so that the Empress could enjoy the snow there. "I will pass down the recruitment order after the General-in-Chief leaves. I will also find a way to prepare the weapons." "You can rest assured," the Empress said again. "In that case, I can rest assured." Hongwu was very clear about the situation in Dayo. He knew that it was very difficult, but he still hoped that the Empress could get enough weapons. Even if it was only 10,000, it would still increase his chances of success. "Does the General-in-Chief know where Lu Qi is?" "Lu Pinghai. As far as I know, his whereabouts are uncertain. However, in November every year, he goes to a fishing village in the East Sea for a few days to pay his respects to a good friend," Hongwu replied. "Get someone to wait for him and tell him that I want spirit yuan pills. He can ask for whatever he wants," the Empress said. Hongwu was slightly startled. The primary spirit pill was the best medicine in the world for strengthening one's foundation. It was specially used to strengthen one's foundation for those who were naturally weak. It was used to strengthen one's foundation so that they could cultivate. Moreover, it could gradually change one's physique within 2 years. This would make one's cultivation speed even faster. Based on this point alone, this medicine was one of the rare treasures in the world. Could it be that His Majesty wanted this thing for that brat? As far as I know, I'm afraid he doesn't have more than 2 of them on hand. 2 years ago, I wanted to exchange one with him, but he refused. In the end, the 2 of them had a big fight and both of them were injured. I'm afraid it won't be easy, Hongwu said with a bitter smile. I didn't expect His Majesty to request this for that brat. Tell him that if he doesn't give it to me, I will beat him to death, and it will naturally belong to me, the Empress said coldly. Hongwu was still smiling bitterly. In any case, Lu Haiping was ranked 8th in the world and was only slightly weaker than Her Majesty. How could he be killed so easily? Even if His Majesty could defeat him, it would not be easy for His Majesty to keep him here. At this point, no one could stop him if he wanted to escape. Furthermore, Lu Pinghai's hometown was in the Yun nation. Could it be that His Majesty wanted to personally visit the Yun nation? After a while, Hongwu returned to the mansion with a slight frown. "Grandpa, the way you're frowning makes you look old." Hong Xian jumped in front of Hongwu and smoothed his frown with her palm. "Hong Xian, what kind of person is Rinpochen?" Hongwu inquired. At the mention of Rinpochen, Hong Xian's face immediately turned black. After returning that day, she didn't receive any punishment, but Yaozi was whipped 10 times. Then, she was scolded by her father and was still locked up at home. That scoundrel was actually chosen by Her Majesty as her husband. What exactly did Her Majesty see in him? Hong Xian couldn't figure it out. She didn't like Rinpochen at all. However, when asked about this matter by her godlike grandpa, she didn't dare to add fuel to the fire. She only recounted everything that happened that day. "I see." Hongwu nodded his head thoughtfully. From his granddaughter's words and what he saw that day, Rinpochen was a vile person. It wasn't a good thing to keep such a person by Her Majesty's side. However, it was better to let someone keep an eye on Rinpochen and continue to observe him. After all, the most important thing now was to prepare for Great Xiao's actions. If Rinpochen discovered that Rinpochen was really as he thought, he couldn't be allowed to live. Rinpochen naturally didn't know what the Empress was preparing for. He also didn't know that he was being targeted by the second most powerful person in Dayo. After staying in Qingxin Palace Hall for 3 days, Rinpochen returned to Earth. He tried to use re-visualization for the past 2 nights, but he couldn't enter that kind of empty state. Once he calmed down, all kinds of thoughts would fly around in his mind like wild horses galloping on the prairie. Even if he tried his best to control his mind, all kinds of thoughts would emerge in his mind after 10 to 20 seconds. Therefore, the first thing he did after waking up was to turn on his computer and search for famous Taoist temples to see if they had any solutions. The first thing he went to was the Lao Jun temple near the city. The temple was very prosperous. Rinpochen first gave 5,000 yuan of incense money and requested to see the temple master to consult about something. After a while, Rinpochen came out of the Lao Jun temple. Taoism indeed had a way to calm the mind. The main point was to keep one's mind and pursue not a single thought. In between, all thoughts had to be extinguished. However, in this case, it seemed like he couldn't practice re-visualization. How could he practice it without any thoughts? When he came out of that state, distracting thoughts arose again. Unless he practiced for a long period of time, the distracting thoughts would be reduced after a long period of time. However, whether he could achieve his goal or not, it would take too long. Even so, Rinpochen still brought this meditation method with him. If the Buddhist method didn't work, he could only try this method first. The next stop was the Grief Temple in another city. It was also quite famous on the internet. The monks here persisted in their ascetic practice. In this day and age, it was very rare. In any case, most people would think of fat heads and big ears when they mentioned monks. Rinpochen arrived at the foot of the Grief Temple in the afternoon. When he went up the mountain, he saw the abbot. He was a skinny monk with drooping eyebrows and was in his 50s. "Master, because I want to do something, I need to clear my mind in a short period of time. How can I do it?" Rinpochen asked directly. The monk drew a circle on the ground and said, "If you smear the inside of the circle with ink, can it be erased after a day?" "I'm afraid it can't be erased." Rinpochen shook his head. After a day, the ink would have seeped in. He understood what the monk meant. The monk was saying that the distracting thoughts had already taken root in his mind. Just like the ink, it couldn't be erased. That's right. It can't be erased unless the soil is dug away. However, if you want to clear your mind in a short period of time, there's only one way, the monk said. How do I do it? Renbachien's spirit was lifted. It was good that there was a way. Smack it with a brick and lose your memory. You will forget everything and your mind will be blank. You can do whatever you want and it will naturally become clear, the monk said. Renbachien really wanted to curse, damn you. I'm afraid this benefactor is also unwilling. If you forget, you won't be you. The monk laughed again. Chapter 132. Early in the morning, the foot of Baiyun Mountain was like a bustling market. It was hard to imagine that there would be so many people gathered at the foot of the mountain in the middle of winter, and there was even a morning market. Youtiao, wonton, egg pancakes, pies, and all kinds of stalls were lined up on both sides of the road. Almost every stall was occupied. Renbachien saw many stalls selling Buddhist beads, guanyin and Buddha pendants, and Buddhist scriptures. Everything here seemed to be related to Buddhism. Renbachien held a meat bun in his mouth and soy milk in one hand. His eyes were bloodshot. He felt that he had risked his life to rush here in one night. He wasn't in a hurry to go up the mountain. He walked around the morning market at the foot of the mountain and stopped to take a look at the stalls that he was interested in. The palace of Deo was good, but it was too cold and cheerless. After staying there for a few days, he started to miss the lively place again. Humans were like this. They were complicated and always wanted things that weren't in front of them. After staying at the foot of the mountain for a while, Renbachien followed the pilgrims up the mountain path. He rested for a long time at the entrance of the mountain before entering. After entering, he saw an L-shaped pool with an arch bridge over it. Beyond the pool, there was a huge building. Hello, I would like to meet Master Su Wen. Master Yuanji of the Sorrowful Temple asked me to come, Renbachien said to a young monk not long after he entered the temple. Please wait here for a while, I will inform the abbot, the young monk said. After a while, Renbachien was invited to a guest hall at the back of the mountain. After sitting there for a while, he saw a young monk walking in from outside. He was in his early 30s and had a pair of extremely bright eyes that gave people the feeling that they were as clear as a lake. Just by looking at this pair of eyes, one could directly ignore his appearance. It was said that the eyes were the window to the soul. Was this person's mind pure and clear? Renbachien subconsciously thought of this and quickly stood up, "Greetings, master." When he lowered his head, he realized that this monk was barefoot. It was winter now, and walking barefoot was really impressive. Renbachien immediately felt deep veneration for him. "Greetings, benefactor." "Benefactor, you came from Senior Yuanji's place. May I know why you are looking for me?" Su Wen sat on a chair with a gentle smile on his face. His voice was very clean. Yes, from beginning to end, the monk gave him a feeling of cleanliness, be it his gaze or his voice. Even though his feet were covered in dust, it still gave Renbachien this feeling. "Master, because I have to do something, I actually have to visualize a picture in a state of emptiness. I have to maintain a clear mind and do it in a state without any distracting thoughts. How can I do it?" "It has to be done within a month," Renbachien said respectfully. He didn't want to go into so much detail, but he couldn't do anything about it since he didn't get it from the first two places. This person looked extraordinary, so he told him the truth. Su Wen pondered for a moment and said, "Look at that picture every day, from morning to night, even when you're eating and thinking about it when you're sleeping. Don't let that picture leave your sight for even a moment. Until that picture occupies your entire mind, leaving no space for even a moment, you will be able to do it." "So simple?" Renbachien asked in surprise. "It just looks simple." Su Wen laughed. Rinpoche thought about it carefully. This method was indeed easier said than done. Whether it was day or night, he had to look at the same picture without the slightest bit of distraction. From morning to night, he had no idea how long it had been. He had to make sure that there was nothing else in the center of his eyes except for the picture. It was indeed easier said than done. Although it was difficult, it was a way to eliminate distracting thoughts. Moreover, it was more time-saving than the mind-calming method. Thank you, Master. Is there any other way? Rinpoche still asked. There are gains and losses. If you don't want to pay, how can you gain? Su-wen laughed. Rinpoche stood up and said, Thank you, Master. No matter what, this was a good method. Don't be anxious, please wait a moment. Su-wen smiled at Rinpoche, stood up and left the room. Rinpoche didn't know what he meant, so he waited in the room. After a while, Su-wen returned with a thin booklet in his hand. He passed it to Rinpoche and said, You can read this booklet every day. It has the effect of calming your mind and nourishing your qi. Thank you, Master. Rinpoche cupped his hands. He was used to this kind of greeting and it was completely subconscious. It's all right. I just want to say something. Benefactor, you can remember it. In this world, there are gains and losses. If you want sincerity, you can't exchange it with sincerity. Using words is just a small trick and won't last long. Rinpoche stiffened after hearing this. He felt his heart beating faster. After a while, he said, Thank you, Master, for reminding me. I just don't know why you said that. I suddenly thought of an old friend and expressed my feelings. Benefactor, please don't take it to heart. Su-wen smiled and said, Benefactor, please go ahead. Rinpoche walked out of the temple and still felt a chill down his spine. What did this monk know? How could he say such words without thinking? After thinking for a long time, Rinpoche still couldn't figure it out. It was impossible for anyone to know about his matters in the other world. After thinking for a long time, he only had one thought. Could it be that this monk was like a fortune teller and saw that he had a romantic debt written on his face? After thinking about it, this was somewhat possible. After all, those traditional things had been passed down for so many years that it was hard to distinguish between real and fake. If there really was such a capable person, it could be considered acceptable. Thinking of this, Rinpoche heaved a sigh of relief. After this incident, that monk had always been somewhat mysterious in his heart. Therefore, he paid more attention to the method that the monk mentioned. Such a person shouldn't be fooling him, right? After going down the mountain, Rinpoche looked at the booklet in his hand. On the cover was the Heart Sutra of Prajnaparamita. After flipping it open, he realized that there were only 3 pages. 1 page of scripture and 2 pages of explanations. No wonder it was so thin. It was already midnight when he returned home. He lay on his bed and fell asleep immediately. After another day, Rinpoche brought candy and wine back to the other world. This time, the wine was Zweiking. In any case, he bought it from the supermarket and wasn't sure if it was real or fake. Ever since he was young, the wuxia novels often mentioned Zweiking or Zweiking. There was always an indescribable feeling in his heart. Therefore, after seeing it, he bought it for the Empress to have a taste. In fact, the Empress didn't attend court every day. She would attend court once every 3 days. After all, there weren't that many matters to handle. Some matters were handled by the elders and the 6 departments. Only the important matters would be discussed in court. Rinpoche saw the Empress in the garden previously. She was dressed in red and her hair was flowing down her back. She was fiddling with the music box in her hand. After seeing Rinpoche, she handed it over to the maid. It's good that you are here. Tell me a story. You haven't finished the previous time, the Empress said casually. Upon hearing this, Rinpoche decided to put other things aside and continue with investiture of the gods. After all, it had been quite a long time. It had been a month since both stories started. It took him some time to remember where he had stopped. As the story progressed, Neza, Lei Jinzi, Yang Jian, and the 10,000 immortals from the Jie school appeared one after another. The story became more and more exciting. Rinpoche only stopped the story when he accompanied the Empress for lunch. He didn't know if it was because of the lighting, but the Empress gave Rinpoche a particularly charming feeling today. He couldn't help but take a few more glances at her. "You are much more daring today," the Empress said as she looked at his face. Rinpoche had indeed become more daring recently. In the past, he always felt that the Empress was temperamental. In addition, she could take his life just by extending her hand. As such, he had always been cautious. However, when he realized that the Empress was just an ordinary person in certain aspects and was even a little girl, the fear in his heart lessened slightly. At least, he wasn't as cautious as before. Chapter 133. At noon, in the garden, the sun shone on the man in front of her. It was as if he was covered with a layer of radiance. He said, "If beauty in the world has a color, it must be the red color now." At this moment, Qi Zixiao felt an indescribable panic in her heart. Her heart was beating rapidly. Following which, a murderous intent arose in her heart, but she suppressed it in an instant. What happened to me just now? Why did I have such a feeling? Qi Zixiao closed her eyes. She didn't know what happened to her just now. It was a feeling that she had never felt before that made her a little panicky and a little lost. It made her think that if she killed this person, she wouldn't be as flustered as she was just now. However, this thought was immediately suppressed by her. Killing him was not her original intention. It was just a subconscious reaction in that instant. At the same time that that thought was suppressed, the palpitation in her heart was also suppressed. When she opened her eyes again, her heart had already calmed down. It was just that there was a strange feeling in her heart that she couldn't explain clearly. Something was changing and quietly germinating. "How's your practice of re-visualization going?" the Empress asked. In fact, she knew that Rinpoche definitely didn't make any progress. However, she suddenly didn't know what to say. "I was about to report to Your Majesty that I have a method that I'm not sure if it will work. During the period of practicing re-visualization, I have to devote all my attention to it and it will be hard for me to react to the outside world. I'm afraid I won't be able to visit Your Majesty during this period of time," Rinpoche said. This was the reason why he came. If he used the method that the monk mentioned to practice re-visualization, he was afraid that during this period of time, he would have to devote all his attention to it and it would be hard for him to react to the outside world. As long as he was slightly distracted, he was afraid that all his previous efforts would be wasted. Naturally, he couldn't care less about the Empress. It was better to inform the Empress about any problems that might arise. "All right, I will get someone to send you 3 meals a day." The Empress was slightly surprised that Rinpoche actually found a method so quickly. Although she didn't know if it would work, he had tried his best. "Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty." Rinpoche sat at the side of a small round table. He could even smell the fragrance of the Empress. It was similar to the fragrance of flowers and it smelled very good. No one spoke. Both of them were immersed in their own thoughts. Seeing that the Empress didn't have anything else to say after the meal, he bade her farewell and went back to cultivate. The Empress stared blankly at Rinpoche's back as he disappeared around the corner. She then withdrew her gaze and said to the 2 people behind her, "Let's go back to the palace." Back in the palace, the Empress sat on the couch with a wine cup in her hand. She was slightly distracted. She still couldn't figure out why she had such a feeling just now. Logically speaking, with her strength, how could something like panic suddenly appear in her heart? After thinking for a long time, she still couldn't come to a conclusion. The Empress thought about the re-visualization that Rinpoche was practicing. At that time, she had also flipped through that martial arts manual and felt that it was a little strange. However, she always felt that there was something special about it. As a result, she didn't stop Rinpoche. However, it wouldn't be easy for him to master it, and the Empress wasn't optimistic about his success. It seemed that he still had to prepare the spirit primary pill. First, he had to find Lu Qi, Lu Pinghai. Get Gu Daxiong here, the Empress ordered. About an hour later, Gu Daxiong hurried into the hall. Your Majesty. Has the 7th Prince of Great Xia left? The Empress asked coldly. Your Majesty, he has already left with his men yesterday, Gu Daxiong promptly replied. Oh. The Empress nodded her head slightly. When she thought of the 7th Prince of Great Xia, she suddenly felt like killing him. When she thought of someone with such a face, she felt a little awkward. She didn't expect him to leave just after she sent someone to deliver the Kirin blood to him yesterday. However, it was good that he left. It would be troublesome if he died in Lon City. In any case, on the surface, he was here to deliver a gift to her. What about the others? The Empress casually asked again. Most of them have left, and there are very few who stayed behind. In addition, Ning Kaichen would like to see your Majesty, Gu Daxiong said. Let him see me tomorrow. You can leave now, the Empress waved her hand and said. After Gu Daxiong left, the Empress was in a daze for quite a while. Then, she shouted, summon Hong Bao. Hong Bao was a burly man who was 2 meters tall. He had a big beard and strands of stubble on his hair. Your subject, Hong Bao, greets your Majesty. Hong Bao's voice was extremely loud and clear, comparable to that of Shi Wanshan and his son. Pick some men and follow the 7th Prince of Great Xia's troops. When he returns to Great Xia, kill him. I want to see his head. Also, don't leave anyone who sees you alive. Your subject obeys, your Majesty, Hong Bao said loudly. Although he didn't know how that person offended the Empress, since the Empress had spoken, even if he was the Emperor of Great Xia, he would still behead the Empress. Go and get ready. We will set off immediately. Remember, I want to see his head. The Empress waved her hand. After Hong Bao left, the Empress felt a little better. She believed that her mood would be even better after seeing that person's head. As for whether there would be any repercussions if the 7th Prince of Great Xia died, she didn't care. In any case, Great Xia was already making preparations. The Empress stood up and walked to the mirror. She looked at herself in the mirror, gently stroked her face with her fingers, and then retracted her hand. The 7th Prince absolutely didn't expect that Qi Zixia would actually want to kill him for such an inexplicable reason. At this moment, he was sitting in the carriage, fiddling with a small bottle in his hand. In any case, he had finally achieved his objective this time. With this bottle of blood, he could save at least 10 years of hard work, and he would be able to compete with his third brother. However, he didn't expect that Qi Zixia would actually want the kid who looked exactly like her to be her husband. It was really unexpected. This world was really interesting. There was actually someone who looked exactly like her. If they wore the same clothes and didn't open their mouths, even her father and her brothers wouldn't be able to tell them apart. Xiao Wu, if I were to stand next to that kid and wear the same clothes, would you be able to tell who is who? The 7th Prince suddenly asked curiously. Your Highness, it doesn't mean that you are a tiger just because you are wearing a tiger's skin. Xiao Wu smiled gently, and her eyes were filled with tenderness. The 7th Prince laughed heartily and hugged Xiao Wu in his arms. Originally, he wanted to find an opportunity to kill that Rinpoche. Now, it seemed that it wouldn't be possible in a short period of time. He could only look for another opportunity in the future. After returning, he would arrange for a few kamikaze warriors to hide in Lawn City. That person would come out of the palace sooner or later. In this world, it was enough that there was only one of him. As long as that person wasn't dead, he wouldn't feel so carefree. Chapter 134. What is storyteller Ren doing? The Empress asked faintly in the palace. The music box in her hand was emitting clear and melodious music. He hasn't left the house for a few days. Every day, he sits in front of the table and reads martial arts. He doesn't move at all. Occasionally, he would yell and pull his hair, Hongwon replied softly. Oh. The Empress nodded her head and stuffed a piece of candy into her mouth. She felt bored these few days and wanted to listen to a story. Unfortunately, Ren Baqin was practicing. Hongwon winked at Qingwon. This was the 5th time that Her Majesty had asked about Ren Baqin every day. Did Her Majesty really like that person? Unfortunately, that person was too weak. At this moment, Ren Baqin, who was considered too weak, was vexed and pulling his hair. He was distraught and was distracted again. The monk's method was more difficult than he had imagined. It had been 7 days. He had been in this world for 4 days and on Earth for 3 days. Every time he concentrated for a while, he would subconsciously have all sorts of thoughts. Not to mention when he was eating and sleeping. He didn't know when he would be able to achieve the state where there was nothing else in his heart. Perhaps he would never be able to achieve it. At this moment, Ren Baqin was very depressed. He took the Heart Sutra. When Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva practiced Prajnaparamita, he saw that the 5 skandhas were empty and transcended all sufferings. Sarira, form is not different from emptiness, and emptiness is not different from form. Form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. It is the same for feeling, thinking, action, and knowledge. Sarira is the emptiness of all dharmas. It is neither born nor destroyed, neither defiled nor pure, neither increasing nor decreasing. Therefore, emptiness is colorless, and there is no feeling, thinking, action, and knowledge. There were a total of 260 words. Ren Baqin read it over and over again. He didn't know how many times he had read it before he finally calmed down. Putting the Heart Sutra aside, Ren Baqin stood in front of the window, took a deep breath, and shouted. "Ah!" A loud shout startled many birds. The guard standing at the door shook his head slightly. The person inside was acting up again. It happened every day, and they had gotten used to it after a few days. After Ren Baqin finished shouting, he felt much better. He turned around and sat in front of the table, flipped open the re-visualization, and continued to stare at the lake on the first page. He poured all his attention into it and didn't dare to relax. Ren Baqin had made some progress over the past 2 days. Even though it wasn't much, it was easier for him to focus on re-visualization. This gave him some hope. How's storyteller Ren now? The Empress was a little bored in the garden. She stretched out her hand and a bird flapped its wings and flew into her hand. If one looked closely, they would find that the bird was flapping its wings with all its might to escape from that palm, but the distance between them was getting closer and closer. It said that the number of times he shouts has decreased. Sometimes, he doesn't even notice when I send food in. However, it is said that his condition is very poor and he has become much weaker. The Empress held the bird in front of her and stared into its small eyes. She saw that the bird's eyes were filled with panic. Feeling a little bored, she raised her hand and released the bird. "Have you eaten?" Every time, the food would be placed in front of him. Sometimes he would eat it, and sometimes there would be leftovers. "However, I haven't eaten for the past 2 meals, Hongwon replied. The Empress nodded her head slightly. She was a little distracted, and no one knew what she was thinking about. Looking at the city wall in the distance, the seventh prince smiled. He was finally back. He had been on the road for the past half a month, and he was extremely tired. No matter how luxurious a carriage was, it couldn't be compared to a mansion. Even though this was a county near the border of Great Xia, at least there was hot water, wine, and delicious food. It was much more comfortable than being in the wilderness. However, he felt a little uneasy these past 2 days. It was a little strange, and he didn't know if something was going to happen. When the carriage arrived at the county magistrate and the registrar came out to welcome them. "Welcome, Your Highness." "Your names?" the seventh prince asked with a smile. "Your humble servant is the local county magistrate, Li Zixing. This is the registrar, and this is the county lieutenant. I will remember them. This time, we are just passing by. Prepare a place to rest. I will set off tomorrow morning." The seventh prince pulled open the curtain of the carriage and said to the people outside. "Yes, Your Highness. The county has prepared everything," the Kaiping county magistrate and the registrar promptly responded. "Well done." The seventh prince nodded his head and put down the curtain. The Kaiping county magistrate, the registrar, and the others heaved a sigh of relief. This person was really too high up, and they couldn't even fawn over him. As long as there were no problems, they would be thankful. As for writing down his name, he would be a fool if he believed in such official words. In the distance, Hong Bao and his men were waiting in the mountains. They were all carrying jerky, which they tore off and stuffed into their mouths. Then, they drank a mouthful of wine. This was considered a luxury in the wilderness. At night, a burly man came back to report, "Sir, they have entered Pinggu County." "Good. On the way to the capital of Great Xia from Pinggu County, we will definitely pass by Broken Dragon Platform." "Let's go ahead and wait," Hong Bao said loudly. "Everyone has rested enough. Let's set off." Hong Bao only brought 15 people with him. Including himself, there were only 16 of them. They shuttled through the forest as if they were flying. Taking advantage of the darkness of the night, they passed through the plains. The next morning, they entered the forest again to hide from the people. That night, they arrived at Broken Dragon Platform, which was 300 miles away from Pinggu County. The so-called Broken Dragon Platform was a canyon. On one side of the canyon was a mountain shaped like a dragon's head, and on the other side was a mountain range that resembled the body of a dragon. It was said that in ancient times, a real dragon fell from the sky, and a huge sword descended from the sky and slashed the dragon into two. That was how the Broken Dragon Platform was formed. After everyone arrived at Broken Dragon Platform, other than a few people who were sent out to keep an eye on the seventh prince's carriage, the others rested in the forest. After another 2 days, someone came back in the morning to report, "That carriage is here." After a while, the carriage appeared on the horizon. There were 50 cavalrymen in front and behind, and all of them were at the human level. This was what the seventh prince had spent a lot of effort to recruit and train. In the middle were 5 carriages. In the most luxurious carriage was seventh prince and Xiao Wu. Behind it was another carriage with 2 consecrators, both of whom were at the earth embryo level. The last 3 carriages were filled with the supplies needed for a long journey. Hong Bao had already inquired about these matters before he left the city. There were only 100 of them at the human level and 2 at the peak of the earth embryo level. Hong Bao grinned. After following them for so long, he could finally make his move. "Sir, what should we do?" Someone came to his side and asked. "Kill them all. Leave no one alive. Remember, I want the head of the seventh prince. Don't smash it," Hong Bao instructed. "Understood." Everyone nodded their heads. When the seventh prince approached Broken Dragon Platform, the carriage slowed down and stopped. 4 cavalrymen spurred their horses forward. Although it was impossible for anyone in Deo to ambush this team, it was better to be careful. When the carriage moved forward again, Hongbao waved his hand, and everyone removed the bows from their backs. Chapter 135. Wei Gu smiled when he saw the 4 riders return. After the broken dragon platform, it would be a flat plain. If they sped up, they would be able to return to the capital in half a month. At that time, they could relax and go back to see their son to see if he had made any progress in his cultivation. That boy was already 13 years old and should be sent to the martial arts academy next year. He looked back at the riders behind him and saw that they all had a relaxed look on their faces. In fact, after entering Great Xia, their nerves had already relaxed. After all, this month's journey was quite tiring. Previously, everyone in Deo was more or less on guard, but after returning, they immediately relaxed. It would be a joke if the 7th Prince of Great Xia was attacked in Great Xia. 100 intermediate man-will knights, even if they really encountered ignorant bandits, would be able to crush them into pieces in an instant. Moreover, there were 2 Earth Will experts in the carriage who had reached the Earth Embryo realm and were only 1 step away from breaking through the Celestial Gate. With this kind of strength, they could be considered experts anywhere. In fact, there was no need for them at all. Under normal circumstances, an intermediate Earth Will expert like him would be able to solve all of them. Set off. Wei Gu stretched out his right hand and waved it forward. The convoy began to move forward. After advancing another 100 meters, when they were about to enter Wulong Gorge, several huge stones that were 1 square meter suddenly whizzed down from the sky. They came from the hillsides on both sides. Enemy attack. Wei Gu's expression suddenly changed as he shouted. Elders, please make your move. The hillside on the side was at least 100 meters away from here. To be able to throw such large stones with such power, only experts at the Earth Will level or above could do it. How could several Earth Will experts attack the 7th Prince's convoy at the same time? Didn't they know who they were facing? Following Wei Gu's voice, one of the carriages in the convoy suddenly exploded. 2 shadows appeared in the air and punched the first 2 huge stones, immediately turning them into countless fragments that flew everywhere. Ah! There were a few screams from the convoy. A total of 10 riders were shot and fell off their horses. A total of 5 huge stones smashed over. Other than the 2 that hit the carriage, the other 3 hit the front and back of the convoy, but many of the riders dodged them. Who's there? Come out! The 2 elders landed on the ground and roared. Ahahaha, Grandpa is here. More than 10 figures shot down from the hillside and surrounded the entire convoy. There were a total of 5 cars in the convoy and 100 intermediate man-will knights. However, they were surrounded by more than 10 people. It seemed a bit ridiculous, but whether it was Wei Gu or the 2 consecrators, none of them could bring themselves to laugh. The remaining 90 knights all had nervous expressions. There were 16 burly men surrounding them. The one in the lead was 2 meters tall and wore coarse clothes. He held 2 large axes that were the size of wheels in his hands. His head was covered in strands of short stubble that looked like a plowed field. Other than the aboriginals, no one else had such a style. The remaining 15 people were of different heights. The shortest was 1.8 meters, and the tallest was 2 meters. They were like small giants, and each of them held heavy weapons that even an Earth Will expert would find difficult to wield. The 16 of them were all aboriginals, and their bodies were filled with powerful blood qi. The burly man in the lead caused the 2 consecrators to feel an intense pressure. As for the other 15 people, with just a glance, Renbaqian knew that the weakest among them was equivalent to an Earth Will expert. There were 16 Earth Will experts, and one of them had even surpassed the pinnacle of the Earth Will level. When everyone realized this fact, their faces immediately changed. How dare you attack the 7th Prince's carriage? Attacking the seventh prince within the borders of Great Xia, are you trying to provoke a war between the two nations? Still not withdrawing. Wei Gu roared. Ha ha ha, you talk too much nonsense. Bah, kill. Hong Bao laughed loudly. Following which, he spat disdainfully and shouted the word kill. At the same time, he spun his right hand, and a huge axe the size of a will flew toward the cavalry in front of him with a whistling sound. Then, one of the consecrators stretched out his hand and dragged the axe into the air. Before that, the axe had already brought along a streak of blood. 5 or 6 riders and their horses were chopped into 2 halves, and the scene was filled with wails. After Hong Bao threw the axe away, he grabbed the other axe with his right hand and leaped forward. The huge axe cleaved straight at Wei Gu. Wei Gu didn't dare to block it and immediately scuttled away from the back of his horse. Hong Bao cleaved the horse's buttocks with his axe. Following which, he leaped over everyone's heads and headed straight for the carriage in the middle. Stay here. The consecrator who dragged the huge axe directly went forward with a long sword in his hand. He transformed into a white line and moved as fast as a meteor. Hong Bao just swung the axe horizontally in the air and blocked the sword. The other consecrator rushed into the seventh prince's carriage, grabbed him with one hand, broke the carriage, and rushed out. Xiao Wu looked at the seventh prince being taken away by the consecrator with a face full of panic and disappointment. The seventh prince didn't even have the intention to pull her back. She felt completely disheartened at this moment. She didn't even feel the splinters of the broken carriage hitting her face. It turned out that she was just a puppet in the seventh prince's eyes. This can't be blocked, right? Otherwise, that consecrator wouldn't be able to escape with the seventh prince. Xiao Wu looked at the dozens of figures rampaging through the crowd and listened to the blood-curdling screams. She smiled bitterly. Anyone with discerning eyes could see that they couldn't be blocked. They couldn't be blocked at all. Even if there were twice as many of them, they still wouldn't be able to block it. These people won't let me live. Xiao Wu understood. An aboriginal expert intercepting the seventh prince within Great Xia's borders was a big deal. If news of this got out, the entire Great Xia would be shaken. Forget it, I'll give myself a quick death. A short sword appeared in Xiao Wu's hand, and the tip of the sword was pointed at her chest. Once those people came over, she would give herself a quick death so that it wouldn't be too unsightly after her death. At the same time, she turned to look at the hillside at the side. Some trees had already begun to turn red, which was the color of fallen leaves. This season and this location were really suitable for her burial ground. She just wanted to take a look more. Wei Gu's current opponent wasn't Hong Bao. It was a burly man using the Aboriginal Army's standard thick saber. Although he was at a disadvantage, he could still hold on for a while. Occasionally, he glanced to the side and saw that the entire team had been killed and scattered. Among them, the most eye-catching was the burly man who was 2 meters tall. Although his movements weren't considered fast, he was still faster than an ordinary manual expert. He held a mace in his hand, and blood rained down when he swung it. It's over. Wei Gu had a miserable look on his face. He hoped that the seventh prince would be able to escape and take care of his family for the sake of his loyalty. Hong Bao laughed maniacally as he chopped down with his axe. The earth embryo expert didn't dare to block and could only retreat. Chapter 136. The consecrated earth embryo level expert had a grave expression on his face. The burly man in front of him gave him too much pressure. As long as his sword wasn't aimed at a vital point, the other party wouldn't dodge at all. Instead, he would just exchange injury for injury. Damn it, where's my axe? Who's going to throw it over? Hong Bao was a little annoyed that he couldn't take down the consecrated earth embryo level expert. Sir, catch it. Immediately, someone left the battle and ran far away. Then, he came back with an axe and threw it in Hong Bao's direction. The outcome had been determined. There were less than 30 knights left alive, and the number was decreasing rapidly. They couldn't escape even if they wanted to. Even if they tried to escape on horseback, there would be people shooting arrows at them. The remaining people didn't pose any pressure to the aboriginals. Hong Bao's opponent naturally didn't want him to catch it. He couldn't withstand one axe, and the other party didn't seem to use much strength. If there were 2 axes, he wouldn't be able to withstand it. Has the 7th prince escaped? As long as he does, I can leave, the consecrated earth embryo level expert thought to himself. However, from his angle, he naturally couldn't see that the 7th prince had already been stopped. The consecrated earth embryo level expert looked at the 2 people in front of him, put the 7th prince aside, and said in a low voice, "Your Highness, please leave first." The 7th prince clenched his teeth and left quickly without looking back. He couldn't understand why these people wanted to kill him. Besides Qi Zixiao, Hong Wu was the only one who could send so many experts. These people didn't look like they were from the military. That meant that Qi Zixiao wanted to kill him. Why? He wasn't very talented and wasn't considered outstanding among his 11 brothers. Furthermore, he didn't do anything to offend Qi Zixiao. Why did she want to kill him? The 7th prince was about to break his teeth. Although he didn't know why, as long as he could return alive, he would definitely take revenge for what happened today. Just as the 7th prince was about to disappear into the forest, he suddenly heard an ear-piercing sound behind him. He jumped to one side and let out a blood-curdling scream. His thigh was pierced by a javelin, and even his bones were broken. The person walking over was a burly man with 5 beast claw scars on his face. If the claw marks were any deeper, his eyeballs would probably be gone. At this moment, his face was filled with murderous intent. He looked into the distance. The consecrated earth embryo level expert was entangled by 2 people and couldn't escape. As long as he had the intention to leave, the 2 people would definitely use of exchanging injuries for injuries. This sent a chill down his spine. The aboriginals viewed dying in battle as an honor. Even after death, their corpses would be buried in the 60,000 mountains, and their souls would be with their ancestors. Therefore, these aboriginals seemed to never know what pain was, nor did they fear death. This was also what the other countries feared the most about Dayo. The 7th prince looked at the burly man who was walking step by step towards him, and his whole body trembled. The fear of death loomed over him. He had never thought that he would die here in such a situation. If he had known earlier, he would never have gone to Dayo. If it weren't for the fact that he valued the dragon scales, dragon blood, and Kirin blood so much, he wouldn't have come here in person. He didn't expect that he would invite a fatal disaster. Why does Qi Zixiao want to kill me? Why? The 7th prince's face twitched as he howled in anger and despair. However, the burly man did not have the slightest intention to answer him. He directly nailed the 7th prince to the ground with a javelin and then chopped off his head with a knife. When the javelin pierced the ground, a face suddenly flashed in the 7th prince's mind. Was it because of him? But why exactly? In the vicinity of the carriage, the battle had already come to an end. Among the 100 intermediate man-will experts, not even a single horse was spared. Only corpses were left on the ground. Wei Gu's eyes were wide open as he looked at the sky. His body was a few meters away. It was already too late for the consecrated earth embryo expert to escape. Other than Hong Bao, who was opposite him, there were 5 or 6 burly men outside the battlefield who were laughing heartily with their arms crossed. "Sir, you are the slowest." Hong Bao's eyes were bloodshot as he cursed, "Damn, this bastard is too slippery." The 2 axes in his hands were the size of wheels, and he was brandishing them like a windmill. The ground around him was almost 3 feet deep, and gullies covered a radius of 100 meters. Although his opponent was already covered in injuries, he still couldn't take them down. The consecrated Earth embryo expert laughed bitterly. He knew that he wouldn't be able to survive today. However, his dignity as an Earth embryo expert made him unwilling to die like this. Even if he died, he wanted to drag his opponent down with him. Very quickly, he found a gap and pounced into the shadows of the axes. The sword in his hand suddenly disappeared, and when it reappeared, it was already in front of Hong Bao's throat. PFFF, the axe in Hong Bao's right hand suddenly sped up and chopped the consecrated Earth embryo expert's chest. Hong Bao's other axe flew out, and his left hand blocked the throat of the consecrated Earth embryo expert. The defense of the Aboriginals was very strong. Before the consecrated Earth embryo expert died, his sword pierced through Hong Bao's palm and was caught. It only caused a small wound on his throat. Damn, he's quite difficult to deal with. Even in death, he still wants to bite me. Hong Bao threw the axe to one side, pulled out the sword from his left hand with his right hand, and casually threw the head of the consecrated Earth embryo expert to the ground. Everyone, go and see if there are any survivors. I will go and take a look. Don't let that bastard escape, Hong Bao shouted, carried the axe, and headed toward the other battlefield. However, by the time he arrived, it was already over. He was surrounded by 7 or 8 Earth Will experts. The consecrated Earth Will expert didn't manage to escape either. Before he died, he killed one and injured 3 others. Hong Bao went over to look at the burly man whose neck had been slit. He felt that it was a pity. Other than having a foul mouth, this bastard wasn't bad. Carry him back. We can't let him wander around outside. Go back first, find a place to deal with his body, and send him back to the mountains, Hong Bao instructed. Yes. The others didn't say much. They directly carried him on their backs and didn't care that his body was bleeding all over. This was the blood of a brother, and there was nothing to dislike. Hong Bao crushed the head of the consecrated Earth Will expert with his foot. The burly man with 5 claw marks on his face handed over the head of the 7th prince. Sir. Hong Bao took the head and looked at it. Mission accomplished. Go back and pack up. Prepare to retreat. Just as they returned, someone shouted, Sir, there's a group of people. They seem to be a caravan returning from our place. Did they see us? I saw them. They're retreating. Kill them all, Hong Bao said coldly. Hong Bao replied coldly. He raised his head and looked into the distance. Indeed, there was a group of people running away hurriedly. 8 of them chased after the caravan, while the rest of them destroyed some of the distinctive wounds on the corpses. For example, the wounds caused by the mace. Not many people in Great Xia use this kind of heavy weapon, and many Aboriginals like to use it. When Hong Bao passed by the 7th prince's carriage, he took a look inside and saw an exceptionally beautiful lady leaning against the carriage. A dagger was stabbed into her chest, and she was no longer breathing. Chapter 137. Among the mountains and rivers, there was a faint mist in the air. There was a lake in the distance. A person was staring blankly at the lake with a pair of lifeless eyes. After a long time, that person's eyes regained their liveliness. Where is this? Renbachian looked at his surroundings and was at a loss. He should have been in the palace, right? Why did he appear here? Did he transmigrate again? Renbachian quivered at the thought of this possibility. He had just gained a foothold in Dayo. If he transmigrated to an unfamiliar world and started from scratch, others might be happy, but he wasn't happy at all. The scenery here was very familiar. Renbachian suddenly looked around and this thought popped up in his mind. Déjà vu. It was as if he had seen it in a dream. Everyone had such moments. When they experienced something or arrived at a certain place, they would feel very familiar, as if they had experienced it before. If they thought about it carefully, they would realize that they had seen it in their dreams. Renbochin felt this way at this moment. He took a few steps forward to the lakeside and a gust of water vapor directly hit his face. Renbochin suddenly remembered when he had seen this place. This was the first image in re-visualization. That lake, that tree, they were all things he had seen in re-visualization. Was he at the beginner level? He visualized the first image. According to what re-visualization said, he was now in his mind. Renbochin was ecstatic at the thought of this and couldn't help but shout. He actually succeeded, he really succeeded. The method that the monk mentioned was indeed useful. Renbochin was ecstatic for a long time before sitting on the ground. He couldn't suppress the smile on his face. He had been very worried about what would happen if he really couldn't cultivate. Perhaps the Empress would really think of a way for him to snatch it from somewhere else. But the storm and carnage that would arise was foreseeable. The Empress didn't care, but what about the other people in Dao's imperial court? What would be waiting for him in the end? Renbochin didn't dare to think too deeply. Now, he finally didn't have to think about it anymore. In any case, he had finally mastered it. As long as he mastered it, there wouldn't be too many obstacles in the future with the help of medicinal herbs. At most, he would need to spend more medicinal herbs and some time. As for combat effectiveness, he didn't care. After letting his imagination run wild for half a day, Renbochin suppressed his excitement and ecstasy. He recited a section of the Heart Sutra to calm himself down. He walked into the middle of the lake. The water was very cold, causing him to shiver a little. However, he endured it and swam towards the center of the lake with all his might. When he reached the center of the lake, he dove into the bottom of the lake. After a long time, Renbochin woke up with a start and realized that he was in a room in Pingshin Park. Following which, he felt dizzy and his vision turned black. He couldn't help but throw himself onto the bed. After an unknown period of time, Renbochin woke up from his sleep and felt a little better. Although he still had a headache, it was not as severe as before. Previously, he had plunged 15 meters into the lake before he could no longer hold on and woke up. According to the re-visualization, the visualization of water could only be considered complete if one could reach the bottom of the lake. He didn't know how long it would take for him to reach that level, but the most important hurdle had already been overcome. He would be able to reach it sooner or later. At the thought of this, Renbochin felt somewhat excited. Looking at the color of the sky outside, it should be afternoon and there was still some time before sunset. Renbochin wanted to look for the Empress to report the good news. After all, in this world, other than the Empress, there was no one else he could share his joy with. However, before he stepped out of the door, he could smell the rancid odor on his body. He didn't know how long it had been since he last bathed and he hadn't even changed his clothes. These days, he had been focusing on the re-visualization and didn't pay attention to other things. At the same time, he also noticed that there was a set of food on the table. He didn't know when it was sent over, but it looked like it hadn't been touched. Initially, he didn't notice it, but when he saw the food, he immediately felt that his stomach was about to bulge. He ate a few mouthfuls. Although it was cold, it could at least fill his stomach. However, when he picked up the bowl, he felt that there was something wrong with his movements. It seemed that his movements were somewhat uncoordinated, which made him feel a little awkward. Renbochin was a little suspicious. After doing a few more movements, he realized that his movements seemed to be a little faster. Originally, an action that took 2 seconds to complete now only required 1 second. His habit was to complete this action in 2 seconds. He always felt that it was very strange. Other than that, Renbochin did a few more movements, but he didn't notice any other changes. It seems that this is the effect of re-visualization, Renbochin thought to himself. Although the effect was a little too fast, it was still a good thing. Soon after, Renbochin went to the side to take a bath. Not to mention shower gel, there wasn't even soap in this world. He used a type of tree ash. After applying a layer of it on his body, he washed it off with water. The effect was similar to that of soap. In the past, he had never taken a bath after returning to Earth. Therefore, he didn't have much demand for this aspect. At this moment, he felt that it would be better if he could make soap. However, this wasn't a problem for the time being. It was better to meet the Empress first. Before leaving the house, he shaved his beard and looked at himself in the bronze mirror. Other than his hair being slightly longer, there were no other problems. Only then did he leave the house. When he saw the Imperial Guard at the door, Renbochin casually asked, "How long have I been in seclusion?" 23 days, that Imperial Guard replied quickly. "Thank you very much. So it has been so long, but it's still acceptable." As Renbochin thought about it, he suddenly thought of a problem. It seemed that the last time he went back was in late November. Over 20 days had passed and he had been on Earth for more than 2 months. It should be around February now. These 2 months, he didn't have any contact with his family at all. He was afraid that his family was worried. According to his calculations, he should be back tonight. At that time, he had to quickly contact his mother. Otherwise, she would go crazy. Furthermore, it seemed that it was almost New Year. He didn't know which date it was and whether he could spend it at home. Along the way, he arrived at the door of the Empress's palace and said to the Imperial Guard, "Renbochin seeks an audience with Her Majesty. Please inform her of my arrival." A moment later, Renbochin strode into the palace. The Empress was eating fruits and didn't even look at him. Hong Yuan and Qing Yuan were laughing secretly at the back. Previously, Her Majesty asked about him every day. Now that he was here, Her Majesty acted as if she didn't see him. "Greetings, Your Majesty." Renbochin greeted the Empress not far away. Only then did the Empress raise her head to look at him. She casually threw the fruit core onto a plate at the side, wiped her mouth with a handkerchief, and asked, "Why are you out? Have you mastered re-visualization?" While she was asking, her eyes were sizing up Renbochin. She wanted to see how his cultivation was progressing. Very quickly, the Empress realized that Renbochin's blood and qi seemed to have become slightly stronger. It wasn't big, but to an expert like her, it was still very easy to detect. Especially when Renbochin was visualizing re-visualization. Previously, he practically didn't eat much. According to the Imperial Guard, he was getting weaker day by day. However, at this moment, she couldn't see it from his body. Naturally, the Imperial Guard couldn't lie to her. In that case, Renbochin had really mastered re-visualization. But even so, the effect was a little too fast. This was because humans could only rely on food and medicine to replenish their blood and qi. But if he didn't eat, food and medicine were also useless. How could his blood and qi recover? Even if Renbochin had mastered re-visualization, his body shouldn't be like it was now. Renbochin cupped his hands and said, "Thanks to Your Majesty's blessings, I was lucky enough to master it." While speaking, there was a look of joy on his face. Chapter 138. Prepare a seat for storyteller Ren and inform the Imperial Kitchen that there will be one more person for dinner tonight. The Empress turned around and instructed Qing Yuan. "Yes." Qing Yuan replied with a smile. A seat was a privilege that only a few high-ranking officials would receive. Now, there was one more person. "How do you feel now?" the Empress asked after Renbochin sat down. Renbochin clenched his fist and said, "There seems to be some changes, but not much. After all, I have just started." Once you have started, it will be a smooth sailing journey. I have also prepared the medicinal ingredients for you. I will get someone to send them to you later. The Empress nodded her head slightly. It was a good thing that Rinpoche had started practicing re-visualization, but he still needed the Spirit Yuan pills from Lu Qi. With the Spirit Yuan pills, he could achieve twice the results with half the effort. At least, his cultivation speed would be much faster. Thank you, Your Majesty. Rinpoche naturally did not know that the Empress was eyeing the pills from Lu Pinghai. If he knew, he would be in fear and trepidation. I can't give you any pointers for this re-visualization that you are practicing. Take it slowly and don't be greedy. If there are any problems, I'm afraid it will not be easy to solve, the Empress said slowly. Rinpoche nodded his head. There weren't many problems with this martial art. However, the Empress's words were a form of concern for him. After all, with her status, why would she say such words? This made him feel warm in his heart. After that night's banquet, the Empress's attitude towards him had indeed changed a lot. Your Majesty, now that I have started practicing, I can already go and take a look at the iron mine. I am greatly favored by Your Majesty and it is difficult for me to repay you. I can only do what I can, Rinpoche said after thinking for a while. All right, but you have just started practicing. Consolidate your foundation for a few days before setting off. If there is anything you don't understand, you can ask me. And that story of yours, you always tell it halfway. If you leave, I don't know how long it will take for me to finish listening to it. I am afraid that I will forget it after a long time. Finish the story in these few days. The Empress's cold voice was heard and Rinpoche nodded his head continuously. Not long after, dinner was served. In the palace, the two of them sat at a table, surrounded by palace lanterns. The light was not very bright, and it was only slightly brighter near the two of them. Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan were far away, and for a moment, it felt as if there were only the two of them in the huge palace. Rinpoche didn't say anything. He only raised his head from time to time to look at the Empress. When he saw where she was looking at, he would push the dishes over. An indescribable atmosphere filled the air between the two of them. There was a little warmth that made Rinpoche's heart beat a little faster. After all, the Empress in front of him was a peerless beauty. Coupled with her status and strength, she was a great temptation to anyone. And now, it was right in front of him. However, when he thought about how the Empress could crush him to death with just one finger, Rinpoche felt that it would be better for him to behave himself. Go ahead and eat. You don't have to stare at me. The Empress raised her head and looked at him. The look in her phoenix-like eyes made his heart beat a little faster. Coldness and gentleness interweaved together like a beautiful painting. I like to watch Your Majesty eat, Rinpoche forcefully suppressed his emotions and said. In my world, there is a saying that beauty is a feast for the eyes. When facing Your Majesty, I feel that I am already full without eating. Why do I feel that you can't eat when you see me? The Empress said coldly. How is that possible? It is my greatest fortune to be able to eat with Your Majesty. I don't know how many people in the world are envious of me, Rinpoche immediately replied with a, you have misunderstood, look on his face. The Empress looked at him and ignored him. She continued to eat. Her movements were slightly slower, but it was almost undetectable. After dinner, the Empress said again, teach you some other dishes. I am tired of eating the dishes from the imperial kitchen. Rinpoche nodded his head in response. He was prepared to go back and copy the 8 major cuisines and send them to caretaker Go. After dinner, Rinpoche accompanied the Empress for a while. Then, he walked back under the moonlight. The palace was always very quiet. Occasionally, he would come across patrolling guards. There weren't even many maids. During the day, there was still some liveliness and vigor. Every time it was night time, it would be quiet. After staying in such a place for a long time, it was no wonder that the Empress's temperament was so cold. After returning to his bed, Rinpoche's mind was filled with thoughts of quickly giving his family a call. He did not know how anxious they were. When he woke up, Rinpoche was slightly stunned by the familiar scenery around him. It was an antique room, and he was still in Pingle Park. Why didn't I go back? Did I calculate the date wrongly? Rinpoche thought suspiciously. According to his calculations, today was the 24th day. It was indeed time for him to go back. This was because every time he traveled, he would stay in this world for 4 days. Previously, he had greeted the Empress on his first day back and began to practice. Therefore, there was no problem with the time calculation. In that case, the guards must have remembered wrongly, right? A group of fellows who had to stretch out all 5 of their fingers to make a 2 sign were indeed unreliable. The Aboriginals knew how to count, and a sow could climb a tree. Rinpoche lamented in his heart. In the future, if he had the opportunity, he would definitely start a mathematics education program so that they could learn addition and subtraction. After getting out of bed, Rinpoche washed his face and sat back on the bed. He visualized the visualization of water, from re-visualization, in his mind. After a while, he appeared on the shore again. Having experienced it once, Rinpoche was considered familiar with it. He immediately swam to the center of the lake and dove towards the bottom. Every time he dove, he would feel greater resistance and pressure. After barely reaching the previous position, Rinpoche could no longer bear it and withdrew from his mind. He felt extremely tired. His body was fine, but his brain was signaling that he was extremely tired. After lying on the bed and taking a short nap, Rinpoche more or less recovered a little. Why didn't breakfast be delivered today? Rinpoche felt a little strange. If he was in Pingle Park, there would always be a maid delivering breakfast. Now, he was hungry. Looking at the time, it was almost 10 o'clock, but breakfast was still not delivered. Logically speaking, such a thing should not have happened. There was someone in charge of this, and it was impossible for something like forgetting to happen. Could it be that something really happened? Rinpoche thought for a long time but still had no clue. He wondered if he should go to the imperial kitchen to get something to eat. There was an organization in the palace that specialized in preparing meals for the maids and guards. However, Rinpoche was not familiar with it. It should not be a problem for him to get something to eat in the imperial kitchen. At the thought of this, he got out of bed and went straight to the imperial kitchen. Everyone was researching new dishes. They were a little surprised to see Rinpoche, but they greeted him happily. After all, Rinpoche was always able to bring good things to the imperial kitchen, be it seasonings or dishes. Previously, everyone called him Brother Ren, because of the rules of the bet. Regardless of whether they were willing or not, at least they had to be willing to lose the bet. Now that they saw Rinpoche again, they did not show any signs of reluctance. On one hand, Rinpoche really knew how to cook a lot of different dishes. Even though the dishes at the banquet that day weren't very good, they tasted pretty good. After learning those, it was much easier for them to research new dishes. After all, none of the people in the imperial kitchen were bad at cooking. It was just that their thinking had been limited. After seeing more things, it felt like a new door had been opened. These days, the imperial kitchen could produce 2 dishes in a few days. Even though the taste was a little lacking, it was still much faster than producing 2 dishes in a month in the past. In addition, Rinpoche's status was different from the past. Chapter 139. After having a meal in the imperial kitchen and giving some pointers to the chefs, Rinpoche left the imperial kitchen. He recalled that the Empress asked him to finish his story. Since he had nothing to do now, he decided to meet the Empress. Recently, he had become more familiar with the palace. At the very least, he was more familiar with Pingle Park, Yangshin Palace Hall, Qingshin Palace Hall, and the Imperial Kitchen. In the palace, the Empress twirled her hair around her finger. After a while, her hair returned to its original state. She was stunned when she heard that Renbochin wanted to meet her. According to the calendar, Renbochin should be back today. Summon him in, the Empress sat up straight and ordered. After a while, Renbochin entered the palace and greeted, "Greetings, Your Majesty. Why didn't you go back?" The Empress looked at him and asked. Renbochin was stunned. "Your Majesty, what do you mean? You go missing for 1 day every 3 days. You told me before that you can't control it and don't know the reason. Why didn't you go back this time? Could it be that you have been lying to me all along?" As the Empress spoke till here, her eyebrows were already raised and her facial expression was already slightly angry. She had never asked him about it and trusted him. However, he didn't tell the truth. In that case, how much of what he said in the past was true and how much was false? The feeling of being lied to filled the Empress's heart. Anger rose in her heart. At the same time, it was mixed with a kind of disappointment and loss. After hearing what the Empress said, Renbochin's face changed drastically. It was understandable that those guards couldn't remember the calendar, but would the Empress remember wrongly? No matter what, she wouldn't be like those guards who only knew how to stretch out 5 fingers, right? "You lied to me," the Empress said coldly. "I really don't know why it is like this, but I have never lied to Your Majesty." Renbochin was in a mess and quickly said loudly. At this moment, his heart was on fire. How could this be? How could this be? How could there be a problem? I want to go back, I have to go back. If I don't go back, what will my parents do? At this moment, Renbochin's mind was filled with such thoughts. At the same time, the light around Renbochin changed slightly. It was as if the light around him was refracted as if it was shining into water. The air around Renbochin seemed to have changed as well. The enraged Empress also sensed that something was wrong with Renbochin. She instantly appeared in front of him, grabbed his wrist, and tried to pull him out. In the next second, Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan, who were in the Yangshin Palace, let out a cry of surprise. When Xianzhe rushed into the hall, she discovered that the Empress and storyteller Ren were nowhere to be seen. What happened? His Majesty has disappeared. Hong Yuan's face was filled with shock. As soon as she said this, Xianzhe instantly appeared in front of Hong Yuan and held her tightly. She widened her eyes and asked, "Where's Her Majesty? Where did His Majesty go?" "I don't know either. Just now, Her Majesty grabbed storyteller Ren and both of them disappeared." Hong Yuan's voice trembled. If the news of the Empress's disappearance were to spread, one could imagine the kind of perilous situation that would ensue. "Tell me the details," Xianzhe said to Hong Yuan. Following which, she quickly ordered the people behind her, "Search. Don't let go of even an inch of the entire palace. Search. At the same time, inform the Department of Inspection to search both inside and outside the city. But don't mention anything about Her Majesty. Just say that storyteller Ren has disappeared. Other than this, don't leak a single word to anyone. If the news is leaked, I will personally chop off his head." Renbochin looked at his surroundings and looked at the Empress in front of him, who was dressed in red. He was dumbfounded and his mind was blank. The Empress's hand was very soft and didn't have any calluses. If there was a ranking of the most beautiful hands in the world, this hand would definitely be one of them. However, at this moment, Renbochin couldn't feel anything. He was completely dumbfounded. At this moment, the surrounding environment was the house that he lived in on Earth. Yet, the Empress actually followed him here. Other than a series of curses, Renbochin didn't have any other thoughts. His brain had long stopped working. Is this your world? The Empress was much more clear-headed than him. After turning her head to look at her surroundings, she frowned. It was too dirty, and there was dust everywhere. Furthermore, the air was very bad, and a pungent smell directly rushed into her nose. Your Majesty! Your Majesty! Renbochin opened his mouth and looked like he was about to cry. Your Majesty, why did you follow me here? After hearing Renbochin's words, the Empress subconsciously loosened her grip on Renbochin's hand. Do you not want me to come? The Empress asked coldly. No, I am just surprised. Even though I have long wanted to let your Majesty see the world that I live in, I don't know if it is really possible. I am really too surprised, Renbochin hurriedly said. This is where you live. Why isn't anyone tidying up this place? The Empress said with a look of disgust. Your Majesty, please go outside and let me tidy up this place. Renbochin felt that he needed some time to sort out his emotions. He was really frightened now. The Empress who dismantled the Gundam with her bare hands and broke into a city single-handedly actually followed him to Earth. This made his mind a mess. Renbochin turned around and opened the door. Your Majesty, please follow me. The apartment that Renbochin rented was 7 stories high. In addition to a bedroom, there was also a small living room and a large balcony. The Empress looked around curiously. Everything was full of a fresh feeling. She had never seen or heard of anything before. What is this? The Empress took a few steps forward and stretched out her hand to touch the glass door of the balcony. Your Majesty, this is glass. You can see outside through the glass. It doesn't affect your vision, but it can block out dust and separate the temperature from the outside. I want this. The Empress immediately decided. Your Majesty, I will go back and finish the iron mine. I will make glass for you, Renbochin hurriedly said. What is outside? The Empress looked outside the glass door and asked. Your Majesty, that is snow. Renbochin looked outside the door. The Empress definitely didn't ask about the balcony. There was a thick layer of snow on the balcony and snowflakes were still falling from the sky. I want to go out and take a look. Open this. Upon hearing this, Renbochin hurriedly opened the door and a gust of extremely cold air directly blew in. At this moment, Great Xia was extremely hot. Renbochin wore the official uniform of the storyteller of Qingxin Palace Hall every day. When the cold air blew on his body, he felt slightly chilly, but it wasn't too cold. The Empress seemed to be completely unaware of the cold outside. As soon as she stepped onto the balcony, she stepped into the snow and scooped up a handful of snow with both hands. Chapter 140. The Empress was dressed in red as she stood in the snow. Her fine black hair was blown by the wind. The moment she touched the snowflakes with her fingers, Renbochin felt his heart beating faster. If possible, he really wanted to take a picture of this scene with his phone. It was so beautiful that it made people lose their wits. Your Majesty, it's a little cold outside, Renbochin said softly. At the same time, he noticed that the Empress wasn't wearing shoes. At that time, she suddenly appeared in front of him on the bed and was brought back by him. The Empress turned her head and glanced at him. Her fine black hair was blown by the wind and a few strands were blocking her delicate and moving face. Renbochin felt that there was a cold look in the Empress's eyes. In the next second, the Empress grabbed Renbochin's throat and threw him against the wall. You lied to me, the Empress said coldly. I trust you, but you have been lying to me all along. The Empress stretched out her right hand and seemed to be waiting for Renbochin's explanation. If he couldn't explain clearly, her whole body was emitting an imposing aura, and it looked like she was going to flip out. Cough, cough. Renbochin felt a tightness in his chest and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He could feel that the imposing aura from the Empress was like a mountain range, making him unable to move at all. Bang! The window and glass door of the balcony at the side exploded and fell to the ground with a crash. Your Majesty, I also don't know how this happened. Previously, I couldn't control it at all. Otherwise, why would I disappear once every 3 days? Isn't this obviously telling others that there's something wrong with me? Why would I do such a thing? I just don't know if it's due to the influence of re-visualization or some other reason. Just now, I was thinking why I didn't come back on the day and suddenly came back, Renbochin hurriedly explained. If the Empress in front of him flipped out, he would really be in trouble. Even if the Empress wouldn't kill him because he had to return to Deo, she wouldn't let him have an easy time. The Empress lifted him up by his neck and pressed him against the wall. I want to know, how much of what you said to me was true? Renbochin's throat was tightly gripped by the Empress, and sweat kept flowing down his forehead. If I could choose, I would always be under the same sky as Your Majesty. A world without Your Majesty is meaningless to me. A future without Your Majesty is also not the future I want. Why would I deceive Your Majesty? It's just that I don't know what unforeseen event happened that caused me to suddenly become like this. I have no intention of deceiving you, Renbochin said with difficulty. The Empress stared into his eyes, seemingly trying to determine whether he was lying or not. After a while, he slid to the ground, covered his throat, and coughed violently. Just now, he felt like he was suffocating. Fortunately, fresh air filled his lungs and brought him back to life. Just now, when Renbochin felt the oppressive aura from the Empress, the residents on the 2 floors below suddenly felt as if their bodies were being pressed down by something. They couldn't move at all and even had difficulty breathing. Some of them even wanted to take out their phones to call 120. However, after the Empress withdrew her aura, those people regained their composure. However, for the sake of safety, it was better to go to the hospital to check if there was any problem. Don't lie to me. Otherwise, even if you are at the ends of the earth, even if you cross this world, I will still kill you. The Empress stepped on the ground with her bare feet, her hair gently fluttering as she looked at him and said. Renbochin leaned against the wall and smiled bitterly. Her Majesty is like a fairy in this world. Who would have the heart to lie to Your Majesty? If there is such a person, he is either blind or a fool. I am neither blind nor a fool, so why would I lie to Your Majesty? Only then did the Empress's expression become more relaxed. She walked to the balcony and looked outside. The broken glass on the ground couldn't cause any damage to her pure white feet. The moment the soles of her feet touched the glass, they turned into powder and were blown into the house by the wind outside. Renbochin sat on the floor to rest for a while before standing up. Even though the Empress was filled with anger just now, she still had a sense of propriety and didn't hurt him at all. Your Majesty, it's cold here. Follow me downstairs, Renbochin said from behind the Empress. All right. The Empress nodded her head, followed Renbochin downstairs and sat on the sofa. I want this, the Empress said as she felt the softness of the sofa. I have already prepared it for Your Majesty. Previously, when I was in the Beast Park, I got someone to tan some animal skins to make a sofa for Your Majesty to sit on. That kind of wooden couch is too hot if it is covered with animal skins. If it is not covered with animal skins, it will be too hard. It's just that during this period of time, I have been focusing on re-visualization. As a result, this matter was delayed. When I return, I can get someone to make it, Renbochin explained as he stood at the side. Take a seat as well. The Empress's expression became gentler when she heard that he had already prepared it. Renbochin could finally heave a sigh of relief and sat on the other side. What's that? The Empress pointed to the chandelier above her head and asked. Your Majesty, that's our chandelier, but it doesn't need oil, Renbochin said as he stood up and switched on the switch. As Renbochin spoke, he got up and turned on the switch. The chandelier immediately lit up, and the artificial crystal under the chandelier refracted the light. This item is not bad, it actually doesn't need oil, I want this. The Empress looked at the chandelier and revealed an excited expression. After hearing the Empress's words, Renbochin quickly thought about how to generate electricity in Dayo. At the very least, he had to ensure the supply of electricity to Yangshin Palace Hall. There were many small diesel generators on the streets, but where was he going to get diesel? He couldn't possibly bring back a pile of diesel every time he came back, right? He couldn't possibly bring back a lot of diesel either. Perhaps he should see if there was a hand-operated or foot-operated generator. He had to think of a way to store electricity. What's that? The Empress asked again. Renbochin looked in the direction that the Empress was looking at and hurriedly said, "This is a clock, it's used to measure time. We use seconds as the unit of measurement here. The thinnest needle moves for 1 second, 60 seconds for 1 minute, which is the longest minute hand. 60 minutes is 1 hour, and there are 24 hours in a day." Renbochin looked at the clock and explained to the Empress. The time now was 10:17 in the morning. 1 hour in that world was equivalent to 3 hours on Earth. When Renbochin met the Empress, it was approximately 11 o'clock in the morning. Converted to 33 hours, it was equivalent to 9 hours in a day on Earth. He had been delayed for a while just now, and it was already past 10 o'clock in the morning. This is somewhat useful, I want it. There were no surprises. The Empress was very interested in everything on Earth. Renbochin belonged to her, and his things naturally belonged to her as well. "I wonder if your Majesty is hungry. Shall I prepare some food for your Majesty?" Renbochin reckoned that in a while, the Empress would classify this house as Dayo's territory on Earth. "All right." The Empress nodded her head and continued to look around. Renbochin saw that she was still at the stage where she was interested in everything after coming to the new world. He left her there and went to the fridge to search for something. Following which, he turned around and said, "Your Majesty, there's only instant noodles left." Chapter 141. Renbochin turned on the induction cooker to boil water. When he turned around, he suddenly saw the Empress behind him. "That thing can produce water. How do you do that? This thing doesn't have fire." The Empress was like a question baby. Everything she saw was new. Everything here was different from what she knew in the past. It was full of grotesque and variegated things. Renbochin had no choice but to explain the tap water, induction cooker, and electricity to the Empress. Although there were still some parts that she didn't understand, she had a rough understanding of them. Fortunately, the Empress didn't ask for this time. After all, regardless of whether it was carrying water or cooking, she didn't have much of a concept. Renbochin was making instant noodles while the Empress watched him from behind. Not long after, the aroma of instant noodles wafted out. Renbochin placed the instant noodles on the table. At the same time, he indicated to the Empress, "Your Majesty, this thing is to be eaten with a fork. Of course, chopsticks are fine as well. However, you have to be careful, it's very hot." There was no such food as noodles in Dayo. At least, Renbochin had never seen it before. He had no choice but to explain in detail to the Empress. It had to be said that even when the Empress was eating instant noodles, it gave people the feeling that she was eating a Manchu Han imperial feast. Every move of hers was so exquisite. "Why aren't you eating?" The Empress raised her head and asked after eating a few mouthfuls. "I just ate something before going to Yangshin Palace Hall. I'm not hungry now. Your Majesty, please wait for a while. I'll go up and tidy up," Renbochin said to the Empress. At the same time, he placed a napkin beside her. Go ahead. The Empress ignored him. Renbochin went upstairs and looked at the completely broken glass and door. He pondered if he should use something to seal it up first and find time to get someone to replace the glass. Back in his room, Renbochin immediately took out his phone. It had been plugged in for more than 20 days and it still had battery. When he turned on the screen, he saw that there were more than 100 missed calls. There were from his parents, his younger brother, Ren Wanyan, Chen Qing, and many other unknown numbers. Renbochin hurriedly called his mother back. After one ring, the call was connected. Bochin. Mom, it's me, Renbochin said softly. Where have you been? Why haven't I heard from you after such a long time? If it wasn't for your friend saying that you might have gone into the mountains to meet someone, we would have reported you to the police. Where are you now? Hurry up and come back. Renbochin's mother bombarded him with questions and started crying in the end. Renbochin felt guilty and said, I did have something to do a few days ago. I was in the mountains and didn't bring my phone with me. Initially, I thought I would be back in 8 to 10 days, but I didn't expect to encounter something that delayed me. How are you now? Where is it? Do you know how worried we were when he disappeared for such a long time? This time, it was Renbochin's father's turn. It seemed like the whole family had been worried to death because of him. I'm at the rented apartment and have just returned, Renbochin replied. Come back in 2 days. I'm afraid it'll take some time. Previously, it was because of the company's matters. Now that I'm back, I have to settle the company's matters first. You two don't have to worry. I'm fine. It's just that I've been running around a lot lately and can't settle down. However, since it's a business, there's nothing you can do about it, right? Renbochin pretended to be relaxed. Turn on the video call. I want to see where you are and if you're all right. Renbochin's father hung up the phone after he finished speaking. Following which, a video call was sent over. Renbochin had no choice but to accept the video call. Immediately, 2 faces appeared on the screen. His father's eyes were bloodshot while his mother's eyes were slightly red and swollen from crying. I told you, I'm really fine. I just came back from outside. Look inside. Renbochin pointed the camera at the surroundings. There was dust everywhere. See, there's such a thick layer of dust. I just came back and haven't cleaned it yet. Following which, he went to the window and took a picture of the neighborhood outside before turning the camera back to face himself. See, I'm back. However, I reckon I'll still be busy for some time. It's good that you're fine, it's good that you're fine. No matter what, we're relieved to see you. The 2 elders heaved a sigh of relief. Next time, you must call us often. It's best if you call us once a week, but not more than a month. Otherwise, we'll call the police. Got it. However, which friend of mine said that I went into the mountains? Is it Chen Qing? Renbochin pondered for a while and asked. He was the only one who could say that, but how did the 2 elders find him? The 2 elders shouldn't know about his circle of friends. He's called Chen Qing. He's a fair and handsome lad. His upbringing is pretty good as well. Speaking up to this point, the 2 elders were stunned for a moment. Following which, their eyes lit up. Who's the lady behind you? Renbochin was astonished when he saw the 2 elders' expressions. Upon hearing this, he almost vomited a mouthful of blood. I still have something to say, I'll talk to you later. Renbochin hung up the phone and turned his head. The Empress was right behind him. Her face was almost touching the back of his neck. An extremely alluring floral fragrance wafted directly into Renbochin's nose. Renbochin instantly froze and didn't dare to move an inch. At this moment, his face was less than 5 centimeters away from the Empress. Chapter 142. Renbochin spent a lot of effort to let the Empress roughly understand the meaning of technology. However, it was impossible for her to fully understand it. No matter how smart the Empress was, she couldn't understand a huge conceptual system that she had never heard of before and even challenged her understanding of the world in a short period of time. Even though she was an Earthling, she only had a rough idea of many things and some of her knowledge was completely wrong. However, Renbochin spent a lot of effort to let the Empress understand that this world was different from the one Dayo was in. Your Majesty, I will send you back first and inform them that you have been missing for half a day. I reckon that the palace is worried sick, Renbochin said to the Empress. If you want to come back, you can come back later. Now that the Empress was here, Renbochin simply let it go. If the Empress wanted to come, then so be it. It was fine as long as she didn't cause any trouble. However, it would be better if he could control the return time. First, he could control the time freely. Second, he could use it to escape. If his life was in danger, he could return immediately. Who could chase after him? When he returned a few days later, he didn't believe that they would squat in the grass and jump out shouting, Demacia. The Empress nodded after hearing Renbochin's words and said, although no one can hurt me, my sudden disappearance will indeed cause chaos. I will go back and inform them first. Renbochin understood that the Empress was going to inform them before returning to continue touring Earth. Your Majesty, grab me, Renbochin said to the Empress and felt a soft hand grabbing his wrist. Return to that world, return to that world, return to that world. Renbochin called out in his heart for a long time, but his surroundings were calm. There was no change in his location at all. Return to Dayo, return to the palace, return to where I came from. Renbochin continued to think in his heart. However, there was still no change in his surroundings. The two of them didn't move at all. This gave him a bad premonition. He looked up and saw that the Empress was looking at him with her clear eyes. Return, return to that world, return to Dayo, return to the palace, return to where I came from. Renbochin simply closed his eyes and recited. When he opened his eyes again, he was still in the same place. The Empress was still looking at him, and that hand was still grabbing his wrist. Your Majesty, it seems like we can't go back for the time being. I reckon that the battery isn't fully charged. Renbochin said awkwardly. That was the only explanation for the current situation. He hoped that he wouldn't be unable to return. If that was the case, there would be a huge mess. Based on the previous transmigration situation, it would probably take 3 days to return. However, it was best for him to try it every once in a while. The earlier he could send this person back, the earlier he could be at ease. He wondered how chaotic the palace was right now. Fine, I shall wait for a while and take this opportunity to see what they are thinking, the Empress said as she released her grip. She didn't seem to care. Renbochin had no choice but to bring the Empress along to learn about the various things in this world. This is the toilet bowl. It's used to relieve yourself. Put down the cushion and sit on it. Then, press this button to flush. This is a faucet. This is the switch to turn on and off the light. This is a refrigerator. It's specially used to store food. Does Your Majesty want ice cream? Renbochin took out a stick of pure milk ice cream. Your Majesty, you can try it. It's iced, but it tastes good. It's specially used to relieve the summer heat. The Empress bit on the ice cream while following Renbochin around the entire house. Your Majesty, you can watch the television. This is also part of the internet that I mentioned just now. You can see images from afar. Renbochin switched on the television. A crocodile with a mouth full of fangs pounced on him. Renbochin's heart skipped a beat. He was afraid that the Empress would get agitated and slap the crocodile. Not to mention the television, even the walls would be destroyed. After all, the Empress had never seen a television before. All kinds of actions were possible. However, the Empress didn't move at all. She sat on the sofa and bit on the ice cream while watching the crocodile on the television. She said, "I keep feeling as if I'm in that box." Someone used a special device to record this image and then played it on the television, Renbochin explained. This thing can be found in Dayo. The big one is about 3 to 4 feet long. It's much bigger than the small thing in this box. It's not considered strong, but it's always hiding in the water and not easy to hunt. Renbochin calculated in his heart. 3 to 4 feet long was about 10 to 13 meters. It was much bigger than the one on Earth. However, to those ferocious people who demolished the city walls with their bare hands, even if the crocodile was stronger than the one on Earth, it wouldn't have much lethality. No wonder the Empress didn't react at all. Renbochin switched to a few channels. Other than advertisements, there were only television dramas or reruns of variety shows. He was afraid that the Empress wouldn't be interested in these things. If possible, he would like to let the Empress watch the news broadcast. At least, she would have a better understanding of this world. Renbochin simply searched for movies on the internet and found the war movie, Pearl Harbor, for the Empress. In his impression, this movie wasn't small. At least, it let her know that the technology on Earth wasn't just for daily conveniences, but also for war. This way, it would be less troublesome in the future. After all, if such a conceited master were to stay here for a few days, Renbochin was afraid that the Empress would want to go out and take a look. If that were to happen, it wouldn't be easy to clean up the mess. Therefore, this movie was to let the Empress experience the power of Earth's technology. At the same time, she would be more restrained. When the time comes, he would give her a good reminder. Your Majesty, this is a very old war scene. I feel that Your Majesty can take a look at it. The power of the weapons nowadays is much greater than what is shown in this scene, Renbochin said as he switched to the scene of the Japanese attack. Are they humans too? The Empress looked at the characters on the screen and was immediately astonished. They are white people and black people. Renbochin roughly explained the 3 main races to her. Very quickly, the scene of the Japanese plane flying in the sky attracted the Empress's attention. This thing can fly in the sky. It's similar to those scrap metal, but those scrap metal can't carry people into the sky, the Empress evaluated. Renbochin pondered. Could the scrap metal that the Empress was talking about be a spirit sword? Renbochin smiled bitterly and said, Your Majesty, please wait for a moment. I'll go upstairs and tidy up. He went upstairs and looked at the big holes on the door and window. Renbochin found 2 bedding and hung it on them to block the wind. Next, he began to sweep and mop the floor, preparing to tidy up the room. At this moment, the sound of various gunshots and explosions could be heard from the television downstairs. The Empress's eyes were full of interest as she watched the scene on the television. At this moment, in Renbochin's hometown, his parents were sitting on the sofa and staring at each other. Renbochin's mother asked, Did you see that lady just now? Which celebrity is she? Renbochin's father rubbed his chin and said, Your son has a girlfriend. If that's the case, you don't have to worry about her anymore. How can that be? That lady is too beautiful and not suitable to be my daughter-in-law. Even though I only saw her just now, she had a cold look on her face. Her character is definitely not good. Let our son make his own decision. He is now an adult and has his own views. Renbochin's father shook his head. As a parent, I have to keep an eye on him, right? Last time, he lied to me and said that he would make arrangements for her. In the end, that lady waited for a week and didn't receive a call from him. Now, when her aunt sees me, she doesn't like me at all, Renbochin's mother complained. Chapter 143. As Renbochin was tidying up his room, his phone rang. He picked it up and saw that it was his father. "Please don't create any more trouble." Renbochin was reluctant, but he still answered the call. "I hope I'm not disturbing you?" Papa Ren asked with a smile. "What's the matter?" "Say it," Renbochin said weakly. "Bring your girlfriend home for a meal. Your mother and I want to see her." "You are thinking too much. She's my business partner, not my girlfriend," Renbochin denied flatly. "If that's the case, I'm afraid your mother will have to make arrangements for you again. Do as you see fit." Renbochin was furious. He was afraid that he wouldn't die fast enough. "If my mother makes arrangements again, I will bring a boyfriend home." After finishing his sentence, he hung up the phone and switched it off. "What did he say?" Mama Ren asked from the sofa. "He said he wants to find a boyfriend." Papa Ren's face turned green. Renbochin tidied up the house in a mess. When he went downstairs, he saw the Empress eating the ice cream. There were already 3 ice cream packages on the coffee table. "Your Majesty, this is too cold. It will hurt your stomach if you eat too much of it," Renbochin couldn't help but say. The first thing the Empress learned to do after coming to Earth was to open the fridge to take ice cream. "I want the ice cream from the one just now." The Empress finished the last bit of ice cream and put the ice cream stick on the coffee table. Then, she pointed to the television and said. The one on the television was Pearl Harbor. Other than airplanes, there were only warships. "Your Majesty, I will do my best, but this will take time. After all, modern technology is a very sophisticated system. The object that you saw is made up of countless small parts. We have to lay a good foundation, and only when Dayo's technology reaches a certain level can we achieve this. Just like practicing martial arts, we can't immediately reach the Earth will level without even getting started," Renbochin said helplessly. The Empress nodded her head in agreement. "What kind of weapon can destroy a city from 1,000 miles away?" the Empress asked curiously. The Empress had seen those things on the television just now. Unless it was an expert like her, ordinary aboriginals would find it hard to defend against it. The main reason was that it was too densely packed and many experts couldn't avoid it. This gave her some respect for Earth's technology. Although it could be seen from the television that the people here were all very weak, the destructive power of those machines was very strong. Renbochin searched for the video of the atomic bomb explosion and played it. The screen was black and white. At the beginning, it was a group of people talking about something. At the same time, there was an epic background music playing. It was easy to get people excited. At this moment, the Empress looked very relaxed and commented, "This music is not bad, I like it very much. If your Majesty likes it, I can prepare some for you. You can listen to it to pass the time," Renbochin immediately said. While Renbochin was speaking, a scene immediately appeared in his mind. In the future, when the Empress was dueling with someone, he would play the divine sword-drawing song with a stereo system. That scene was simply too beautiful. The scene on the TV continued. With a boom sound, a huge cloud of dust rose into the sky from the ground in the distance, forming a huge mushroom cloud. After that, he swooped down from the sky again. In the distance, flames and smoke formed a mushroom cloud that soared into the sky, and the entire ground shook. Upon seeing this, the Empress's expression turned serious, and her body straightened up. Even an expert like her wouldn't be able to achieve such power. In particular, the range was extremely large. If she was close, she wouldn't be able to dodge it at all. This kind of power already existed in legends. The explosion range of such a weapon can probably envelop the entire Lon City. On Earth, there are more than 40,000 warheads of such a weapon, enough to destroy a world. Renbochin looked at the Empress's expression and added in a timely manner. However, you said that the use of such weapons has already been banned. After hearing Rinpoche's words, the Empress relaxed and slowly leaned back on the sofa. Even though her expression was still very grave, her eyes were emitting light. I want this. The Empress looked at Rinpoche with glowing eyes and said earnestly. At this moment, her expression was like that of a little girl who saw her beloved toy. Great Xia is making preparations and will definitely make a move within 2 years. If we have this kind of weapon, we can eliminate the Great Xia army in one fell swoop and march straight into the capital of Great Xia. Rinpoche almost vomited blood again. Your Majesty, this thing is only in the hands of each nation. I can't buy it. Rinpoche's face turned black. I can exchange for it. As long as Deo has it, I can exchange for martial arts, secret manuals and other things, the Empress insisted. Your Majesty, it's better not to consider this kind of weapon for the time being. Even if we can really obtain it, I may not be able to bring it over. If it's other weapons, there might still be some hope. Deo can even think of ways to manufacture some, such as grenades and mines. However, it's not easy. We need iron ores, smelting, precision processing, and gunpowder. I feel that iron ores and standardized weapons are the more pressing issues at hand, Rinpoche said to the Empress. At the same time, he was pondering over what the Empress said about Great Xia definitely making a move within 2 years. In addition, the Empress previously asked him about iron ores and forging weapons. It seemed like the army didn't have enough equipment. However, after thinking about it, it was very normal. Deo's industrial foundation was very poor. They completely relied on their strong individual strength to deter other nations. If there was going to be a war between the two nations, Great Xia was, after all, the strongest nation. Therefore, the Empress had no choice but to make more preparations. The Empress was slightly disappointed. However, she knew that what Rinpoche said was right. She was a little too anxious. How many things can you bring back? The Empress asked. I haven't tried before. I reckon that I can only bring back things that I can carry. After we go back, we will first make iron ores and forge weapons. After hearing what Rinpoche said, the Empress finally gave up. After all, she was very clear about how weak Rinpoche was. There weren't many things that he could carry. If it's Deo's standard long sabers, as they are relatively heavy, I reckon that I can only carry about 10 of them. It's just a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. However, it was still necessary. She had to go through various channels to obtain the military equipment for 20,000 soldiers. Furthermore, it was hard to say how much she would get in the end. I want standard long sabers. Every time you go back, try to bring some back, the Empress said. Rinpoche nodded. Your Majesty, I don't have enough funds here. I'm afraid I will need your help. Sure, I can allocate a portion of the imperial treasury for you to exchange for money. The Empress nodded. After hearing these words, Rinpoche felt relieved. The Empress probably had a lot of good stuff, right? Furthermore, some things might not have much value in Deo, but they were still very valuable on Earth. However, which was better, a standard long saber or a rifle? Rinpoche felt that the latter was better. Although the people of Deo were strong, casualties were inevitable in close combat. Using a rifle could completely change the way of warfare. Thinking about the soldiers of Deo, if they were to carry a rifle, carry a full load of ammunition, and transform into Rambo, in Rinpoche's opinion, it would be best to smelt and manufacture standard weapons in Deo. It would be better to carry weapons and ammunition when he traveled back and forth. Of course, this was just an idea. After all, the consumption of ammunition was really too fast. Just the amount of ammunition needed for practice was not something that he could afford. However, thinking about it again, Great Xia's army was lined up and charged forward in a dense battle formation. It seemed that as long as they knew how to fire a gun and load it, it would suffice. In this case, if he only carried ammunition each time, he could carry 2 boxes of ammunition, which was 60 kilograms and 3,000 rounds. In 2 years, he could travel 180 times and carry more than 500,000 rounds of ammunition. Thinking about this, Ren Baqin was shocked. Wouldn't it be too dangerous to have so many firearms wander to the other world? Furthermore, he was afraid that he would be targeted by others if he carried so much ammunition. The Empress saw that Ren Baqin was deep in thought and didn't interrupt him. She quietly looked at his side profile. To her, this was the first time since the creation of the world that she quietly waited for someone to think. Chapter 144. I want to go out and take a look. When Ren Baqin heard this, he was immediately awakened from his thoughts. His face was stiff like a robot as he turned to look at the Empress. This man was indeed not someone who could live in a house. Ren Baqin roared in his heart. Follow me out. The Empress looked at Ren Baqin seriously and said. Your Majesty. I can go out, but I'm afraid I can't address you as Your Majesty outside. We don't have an emperor here. Even if there is one, it's not you. Ren Baqin looked bitter. I understand this. But you don't have an emperor. Who governs the country? The Empress was flabbergasted. We are a democracy here, and the country's leader is elected. Ren Baqin roughly explained. Even though he didn't understand politics, he still knew the basics. I understand. Follow me out and take a look. The Empress roughly understood and thought that if someone asked her to go down, she would slap him to death. The people in this world were too weak. Your Majesty, I'm afraid your clothes won't do, Ren Baqin said. I still need to prepare some clothes for you. Go quickly. The Empress waved her hand. Ren Baqin helplessly turned on his phone and saw a bunch of missed calls. They were all from his parents. You are my little apple. The phone rang again, and the caller ID was still, Dad. Ren Baqin picked up the phone and prepared to go to the second floor to answer the call. If he didn't answer the call, his parents would probably rush over overnight. However, he saw the Empress looking at him with a burning gaze. Is someone communicating with you from a distance? Is there anything you are afraid of me knowing? Ren Baqin didn't expect the Empress to remember it so clearly and react so quickly. She had never used it before, but she immediately knew that he was going to answer the call. It's from my parents. Ren Baqin looked bitter. You're not allowed to leave, sit down. The Empress looked at him. Dad, Mom, please don't say anything overboard. Ren Baqin prayed in his heart while looking at the Empress. He didn't know why the Empress suddenly became so interested and stared at him. You are my little apple. This damn ringtone made Ren Baqin very upset. He clenched his teeth and had no choice but to answer the call. Immediately, a voice came from the other end of the line. You have grown guts. You actually hung up and turned off your phone. Son, don't tell me you really like men. I'm telling you, if you bring a man back, we'll immediately break off our mother-son relationship. Ren Baqin's parents were shouting from the other end of the electric sparks. Ren Baqin's face turned ashen as he hung up the call. He almost smashed the phone. Beside him, the Empress's face froze. Are you gay? Pfft. Ren Baqin spat out a mouthful of blood. It's a misunderstanding. Your Majesty, this is definitely a misunderstanding. The Empress's hair began to dance wildly behind her, and the temperature in the room plummeted. Your Majesty, please listen to me. I was forced to do this. At my age, I should have gotten married and had children long ago, but I can see Your Majesty every day. My heart is already filled with your Majesty's figure, and there is no space left. How can I marry and have children with other people? I would rather stay by your Majesty's side and watch your Majesty's figure every day. This is my greatest wish. It's just that this official's parents don't know. Seeing that this official is unwilling to get married and have children after so long, this official has a headache. Renbachian's words finally pacified the Empress, who was about to go berserk. You are the queen that I have chosen. You can tell this to your parents. Your Majesty, my parents are just ordinary people and don't have much experience. They won't believe this even if they break their heads. I can tell them personally. The Empress had an expression that said, "This is your greatest honor. Your Majesty, you better hide your identity. This identity can't be exposed. Even if it's exposed, what can they do to me? Even though the weapons in your world are very advanced, the most powerful weapons can't possibly be deployed in crowded places." No imperial court would do that, the Empress said calmly. In a short period of time, she had already figured out what was going on. No matter how powerful the weapons in this world were, could they make an entire city of people perish together with themselves? Renbachen saw that even an atomic bomb couldn't scare her, so he had no choice but to act pitifully. Your Majesty, you aren't afraid, but I can't. If something happens to me, I won't be able to accompany you anymore. After all, I still have to come back often. Furthermore, Your Majesty, you have always been in the palace. Don't you want to experience life in this world like an ordinary person? The Empress thought about it. She was still very curious about this world. Furthermore, walking in the city like an ordinary person was a little attractive to her. In addition, the person in front of her was indeed very weak. If something happened to him, she wouldn't be able to return to Deo. She wouldn't have the things that she liked. Forget it, I will do as you said and live the life of an ordinary person. The Empress finally agreed. Why don't I go out and buy some clothes for you first? Your Majesty, can you wait for me here? Renbachian asked tentatively. I don't allow that. The Empress immediately rejected him. In this unfamiliar world, the Empress knew nothing except for Renbachian. How could she let him out of her sight? If something happened to him, how was she going to return to Deo? Renbachian scratched his head. He also felt that it wasn't appropriate to leave her here, but he couldn't bring her along to buy clothes. He opened his phone and scrolled through his contact list. In the end, there was only one person he could choose. Seeing that the Empress didn't care about him, Renbachian took his phone and walked to the kitchen to make a call. You are back. Jiang Nan's gentle voice came from the other end of the phone. Renbachian suddenly felt that this was what a girl should be like. The Empress was really too dignified, cold, and easily flipped out. Yes, can you help me buy some women's clothes and shoes and send them over? I need them urgently, Renbachian whispered. Hello? Hello? Are they torn? Be careful next time. I happen to have time, so I can help you. But when did you get a girlfriend? Jiang Nan asked with a smile. It's not what you think. She's about 1.7 meters tall and weighs about 50 kilograms. It's best to wear a conservative red dress. Add a jacket and shoes. Give me a pair of size 36, 37, 38, and 39. I want flat shoes. Renbachian understood the Chinese way of thinking too well. As long as there was something, they would think in that direction. He couldn't be bothered to explain further. Do you want underwear? Renbachian clenched his teeth and said, yes, it's probably C, by a few more sizes. Pfft. Do you have any other requests? There's nothing else. Just do as you see fit, from top to bottom, as long as they match well. Also, don't tell Chin-Chin, Renbachian exhorted. It's too late, he's just beside me, Jiang Nan said with a smile. Chen Qing immediately shouted from the other end of the phone, "You're still hiding and don't dare to show your face. Alright, just send them to my door. Let's not see each other today, I'll look for you for a meal in the future," Ren Baqin whispered. Jiang Nan smiled and hung up the phone. "I heard a woman's voice," the Empress said unhurriedly as she sat on the sofa. "I can't leave, so I can only ask someone else to buy it," Ren Baqin said to the Empress. "Oh." The Empress snorted softly and didn't mind. In fact, she heard Ren Baqin's voice clearly, but she still said something inexplicably. "Your Majesty, I have something to discuss with you." "Speak." The Empress turned and looked at him. "Your Majesty, you can't address yourself as I in this world. I'm afraid I have to address you by your name, or you can choose another name," Ren Baqin said. "I allow you to call me by my name in this world," the Empress said. "After we go out, if Qi." "Your Majesty, what do you like, you can tell me. You have to pay to buy things." Ren Baqin opened his mouth but didn't say anything. "You have to pay even in Dayo." "Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child?" the Empress said unhappily. "I'm specially following behind your Majesty to help you pay your bills," Ren Baqin immediately changed his tune. The Empress then nodded her head and revealed a smile on her face. She agreed with Ren Baqin's words. "No matter what happens outside, you must not be impulsive. Leave it to me. If someone offends you, it's because they don't know your identity. I hope your Majesty won't be angry. Fighting on the streets is strictly prohibited in this world, and killing is even more prohibited. If anything happens, the police will immediately come to investigate, which is equivalent to Dayo's Public Order Bureau. If something happens, your Majesty's identity will be easily exposed." The Empress continued to nod her head. "I can set 3 rules with you." Chapter 145. Qi. Xixiao. Ren Baqin was perspiring profusely as he looked at the Empress. "I allow it." The Empress nodded her head. "Your Majesty, you have to call me that in this world," Ren Baqin corrected her. "Well, I allow you to call me by my name," the Empress corrected him. "Qi. Xixiao, where do you want to see?" Ren Baqin asked. "You said that the commoners here live and work in peace and contentment. Let's go and take a look." "I want to see how the commoners in your world live," the Empress said after thinking for a while. "Then let's go to the supermarkets and shopping malls. Those are the most crowded places. However, due to the large number of people, they might accidentally touch you. Don't get angry," Ren Baqin warned her again. "I got it. Since I have made an agreement with you, I will not go back on my word," the Empress said impatiently. "Your Majesty, you might not know how to wear the clothes in this world. I have to inform you about this," Ren Baqin said as he searched for bra on his phone. Then, he showed the photo of the phone to the Empress. The Empress saw a photo of a woman wearing a bra on the screen. The phone instantly appeared in her hand and 3 of her fingers exerted force. Boom, the phone exploded. Even the battery exploded. There was no injury on the Empress's hand. "What do you want to say?" the Empress asked unhappily. Ren Baqin opened his mouth and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "I'm afraid that your Majesty won't be able to wear the clothes in this world. You can tell me how to wear it when the time comes," the Empress said coldly and turned her head to look out of the window. "But I was going to tell you how to wear it just now." Ren Baqin thought helplessly, but he couldn't say anything. It was a pity that his phone had died a tragic death. Could it be that he had to wear a bra to demonstrate to the Empress later? It seemed like this was the only way. Even though he only knew how to remove the bra, he didn't know how to wear it. After waiting for a long time, the sky was about to turn dark. Renbocchen then heard someone knocking on the door. There's someone outside. The Empress turned her head and looked over. The clothes are here. I will go out to get them after they leave, Renbocchen said. He didn't want to see Qingqing and Jiangnan now, especially not to let the Empress see them. Even though the Empress had promised him that she wouldn't get angry easily, he felt that it was better not to complicate matters. After about 10 minutes, Renbocchen stood up and looked through the peephole. There was no one there. After pushing open the door, he saw 7 to 8 bags and boxes on the ground. Renbocchen carefully carried all of them to the entrance of the house. Fortunately, the two of them didn't turn around and hide somewhere. It had to be said that it was a very heartwarming thing to have such an understanding friend. Renbocchen closed the door, piled the boxes on the coffee table, and took out the shoes one by one. The shoes were exactly the same. They were black and had a buckle that was a combination of half a square and half a 5-pointed star. The buckle was decorated with broken diamonds and looked very beautiful. Let's try the size. Renbocchen passed the size 37 to the Empress. The Empress was rather pleased with the expression on her face. It was rare to see such an expression on Renbocchen's face. She looked somewhat like a young girl. This is fine, the Empress said after putting it on. Renbocchen memorized the size 37. He then opened the other bags. Inside was a long red dress. The upper part of the dress was made of gauze and the rest of the dress was made of an opaque material. The dress was full of exquisite embroidery. It's fine. The Empress nodded her head. Your Majesty, this dress is put on from the top to the bottom. Renbocchen roughly gestured and the Empress nodded her head. There was a long coat in the other bag. Renbocchen casually put it aside. It was not too late to try it on later. The last paper bag was poured on the table. There were 2 lace panties that were translucent at the front and back. One was black and the other was red. There were a few bras, black and red, and they were also lace. Your Majesty. Renbocchen's throat was a little dry. Even though these undergarments weren't very revealing, it was enough to make his heart tremble if the person in front of him wore them. What's this? The Empress curiously took one of them. This is the underwear of our world. Renbocchen said awkwardly. Then, he gritted his teeth, took out a bra and put it on himself. This is how you wear it, then buckle it at the back. This is an inner bra, it's like this. Before Renbocchen could finish his demonstration, his whole body flew into the air, scaring him half to death. Fortunately, he only fell lightly on the ground. When he came back to his senses, he saw a red dress disappearing around the corner. Soon after, the door closed with a bang. Phew. Renbocchen sat on the ground and let out a long breath. Teaching the Empress how to wear undergarments still made him a little embarrassed. He got up and sat on the sofa. Renbocchen waited for the Empress to change her clothes. He was also thinking about how the Empress would look after changing into modern clothes. After waiting for a long time, just when Renbocchen was wondering why the Empress hadn't come out yet, he heard a voice coming from the room that the Empress had just entered. Renbocchen. Your Majesty. Renbocchen stood in front of the door and asked carefully. In your heart, what do you think of me? I want to hear the truth. The Empress's voice came from the room. It was a little deep. Like a fairy in the world, you are the only existence in this world, the world where Deo is located. The radiance from your body is like the sun that attracts everyone. When they get close to you, they will feel the scorching heat and burns, but they are willing to do so, Renbocchen said in a low voice. Renbocchen lowered his voice and said. Even he himself felt that his attainments in bootlicking had reached perfection. Come in. I can't fasten it anymore. Following Renbocchen's words, the Empress's voice came from the room. Her voice was slightly trembling, and it seemed to be a little shy. In an instant, Renbochen's heart trembled incessantly along with this voice. It was as if a ball of fire was burning in his heart. "Your Majesty, I'm going in." Renbochen hesitated for a while, gently turned the door handle and said. Inside the room, the Empress's back was facing Renbochen. She was only wearing a pair of black translucent panties. One of her arms was covered in front of her chest. 2 black straps were hanging down, and her hair was hanging in front of her shoulders. Her fair and smooth back, slender legs, and hooked buttocks were all exposed in front of Renbochen. Renbochen's throat was dry. His heartbeat soared from 67 beats per minute to 120 beats per minute. It was like a beating drum, and it seemed as if it would jump out of his chest at any time. The back view in front of him, as well as the identity and strength of the owner of this back view, simply made him want to explode. "I can't fasten it anymore." "Fasten it for me," the Empress said coldly. However, the trembling in her voice couldn't be concealed. "Yes, Your Majesty." Renbochen closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Even though his heart was still beating very fast, it was at least slightly better than before. Renbochen took a few steps forward, stretched out his hands, and grabbed the 2 straps that were hanging down. He took a whiff of the Empress's fragrance and fastened the straps together with his trembling hands. When his fingers came into contact with the smooth skin of the Empress's back, the Empress trembled slightly. Renbochen's forehead was beaded with sweat as he fastened the straps. It took him a long time to fasten it properly. During this period of time, his fingers brushed across the Empress's back more than once, giving her goosebumps. And every time he made contact, Renbochen's heart would tremble once. "Your Majesty, I've fastened it." After Renbochen fastened the straps, he finally wiped the sweat off his forehead. "Get out." Chapter 146. After a long time, the Empress changed her clothes and came out of the room. Renbochen's eyes immediately lit up. Even though she was still wearing a red dress, the modern and exquisite red dress gave off a different vibe. She became more charming. However, her expression was still as cold as ever, seemingly colder than before. This greatly reduced her charm. "Let's go out and take a look," the Empress said coldly. The Empress said coldly. It was as if nothing had happened just now and she had returned to her original state. Renbochen suddenly felt that the Empress who was trembling slightly in the room was just his imagination. The one in front of him was the real Empress. This was what the Empress should look like. "All right." Renbochen nodded his head. He went back to his room to change his clothes, took his wallet and keys, cut off the label on his coat, and draped it over the Empress. "It's a little cold outside. Even though you won't be affected, you still have to put on a show for ordinary people," Renbochen said softly. Even though he felt that the lady he saw in the room just now was an illusion, there were still some changes in his heart. Some soft spots in the bottom of his heart were touched. He didn't know if he was more afraid of the Empress or if he had more feelings for her. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't moved when such a lady chose him as her husband. It was just that the Empress's might had completely suppressed this feeling in his heart. At this moment, this feeling sprouted again. It was just that he didn't know when it would blossom. The Empress didn't reject him and didn't look at him. She just stood there and let him drape the coat over her. The coat was black and made of wool. The style was very simple, but it was also very easy to match. Jiang Nan had indeed put in a lot of effort. After draping the coat over the Empress, the 2 of them went out and took the elevator down. Renbochen conveniently explained, "This is an elevator, it can transport people and goods up and down quickly." The Empress could feel a slight sense of weightlessness. "What's written on it?" The Empress finally opened her mouth and pointed to the button. It's written in numbers, 1, 2, 3. Each number represents a floor, Renbochin patiently explained. The Empress slowly memorized these numbers in her heart. It's out, I want to see what it looks like. Enchanting sat in the driver's seat with a smile on his face as he looked at the two people walking out from a distance. You're too naughty. Jiang Nan smiled gently. She knew that Enchanting was just curious. As the two of them approached, their eyes widened in shock. The lady walking beside Renbochin was like a fairy from the world. Even in modern society, people had seen countless celebrities and idols, but this lady gave off a different vibe. She was classical, elegant, and all kinds of words could be used to describe her. Even a girl from Jiangnan was captivated. Pinch me, I want to see if I'm dreaming. Where did 8,000-year-old find such a person? Enchanting smacked his lips. What do you think? Jiangnan glared at him. It's too high and too cold. I can only look at it from afar. It's out of my league. Enchanting shook his head. Yes, he was too tall and too cold. If someone said that such a person didn't have a background, he wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. She was from a small family. No matter how beautiful she was, it was impossible for her to give others such a feeling. Even a rich second generation like Enchanting felt that he could not get close to her. Nowadays, people, especially those who had some family background, had more or less seen the world. They could more or less tell a person's social class. It was impossible for them to not have this little bit of discernment. I just want someone to grow old with. As for those who are too high class, let's stay away from them. Enchanting held Jiang Nan's hand and said. Jiang Nan felt the warmth on her hand and revealed a smile. However, I'm really curious how she got together with 8,000-year-old. Enchanting's words made Jiang Nan nod her head. A phoenix couldn't travel together with a sparrow. However, this scene happened in front of the two of them. Renbochin didn't notice the two of them. The Empress noticed them but ignored them. Why would she care about the gazes of ordinary people? The two of them were in the underground car park. The Empress looked at the steel beasts on both sides curiously. Renbochin pulled out the front passenger seat for her. This way, it would be easier for the two of them to talk and introduce some things to her. As Renbochin drove the car out of the car park steadily, the Empress asked, "This is the thing that you said can run without a horse, right? This is driven by gasoline and is completely mechanical. It's the main mode of transportation for the people here." Renbochin nodded his head and explained. The Empress remembered what he said very clearly. Just now, the Empress did see a lot of cars in the underground car park. This kind of thing was very common here. It was still snowing outside. Renbochin drove at a moderate speed, allowing the Empress to clearly see the scenery on both sides. When they first left the neighborhood, it was still a little secluded. As the car moved forward, the number of cars in the surroundings started to increase. There were more and more people on both sides of the road. The storefronts were getting more and more beautiful and the buildings were getting taller and taller. At this moment, the sky was almost dark. The storefronts on both sides of the road had switched on their lights. The signboards were also lit up. The street lights were also switched on. Everywhere was filled with splendid lights. The Empress stared outside and didn't speak to Renbochin. Everything that she saw in front of her had indeed shocked her. Even though she saw a lot of things in the room, it was more of a novelty. What she saw now was a highly developed society. It was a society that was completely different from Dayo. Just by looking at the clothes of the passers-by, the buildings, and those splendid lights, one could see the level of development of this world. Who built those lights on the pole? The Empress looked at the street lights that were placed at intervals and finally couldn't help but ask. From just now until now, she didn't see any dark places. Everywhere was sprinkled with lights. In addition to the fluttering snow outside, this was really a dreamlike city. It's built for the city. It can be considered as a city's basic construction. There are many basic constructions in a city. For example, drainage facilities like sewers, basic electricity, running water, street lights, and roads are all part of a city's basic construction. In addition, there are also public facilities like plazas, parks, and other places for people to relax and entertain, Renbochin explained to the Empress while staring at the road with rapt attention. Will my country become like this one day? The Empress looked at the surrounding scenery with envy in her eyes. Such a scenery made it impossible for her to remain indifferent. With me around, it will definitely be possible. Renbochin finally shifted his gaze from the road in front of him to the Empress and said energetically. Chapter 147. We're here. Renbochin stopped the car and opened the door for the Empress. To the onlookers, he looked like a gentleman. Snow fell on their heads. The Empress looked up at the sky happily. Under the illumination of the lights, snowflakes fell like fairies in the night sky and landed on her head and body. However, when they landed on the Empress's hair, they instantly disappeared. Let's go in. Renbochin tightened the Empress's coat. The two of them were in a relatively large supermarket. Renbochin felt that the Empress might be more interested in this place. This was the best place to observe the daily lives of ordinary people in China. There are a lot of people. The Empress looked at the entrance of the supermarket and said. In Dayo, there wasn't such a dense flow of people. Of course, there wasn't such a large store either. Renbochin and the Empress walked in side by side. It wasn't suitable to walk half a step behind. Furthermore, Renbochin had to help the Empress fend off the surrounding people. Whether it was because he was afraid of the Empress's anger or because the Empress was his future wife in name, his actions were very natural. To outsiders, there wasn't anything strange about it. Renbochin didn't know what he was feeling at the moment. He just wanted to do it. Perhaps it was more of the former, but it wasn't necessarily the latter. However, Renbochin quickly realized that even though there were people coming and going here, everyone subconsciously changed their movements when they got close to the Empress. No one was within half a meter of her. The most eye-catching thing about the Empress was that she was too beautiful, especially with her temperament. That kind of nobility and indifference combined together made her look like someone who shouldn't be in this place. Even though she gave off a cold feeling, she still attracted the attention of passers-by. The two of them entered the supermarket. Renbochin pushed a cart and walked side by side with the Empress. The Empress's gaze was on the dazzling lineup of goods on both sides. There were so many goods that she was dazzled. These are potato chips, considered a type of snack. They aren't very healthy. Every time Renbochin noticed that the Empress's gaze lingered on an item, he would softly explain and put the item into the cart basket. These are biscuits, a food that is occasionally used to satisfy one's hunger. The taste depends on one's personal preference. These are canned fruits that are drained and can be stored for a long time. This is salt. When Renbochin mentioned salt, the Empress picked up the bag of salt, observed it carefully, and said, "It's very white, almost the same as the salt used in the palace. How much can 1 tael of silver buy?" Renbochin did some calculations. 1 tael of silver was 500 grams, which was about 2,000 yuan. I can buy 1,000 bags. The Empress looked at Renbochin and said, "In Dayo, 1 tael of silver can only buy so much." Renbochin nodded. He understood this matter. In Dayo, 1 tael of silver could buy a caddy of salt. Furthermore, the salt was coarse and had a poor color. This kind of fine salt could only be bought with 1 tael of silver. The difference between the two worlds was 1,000 times. I want this. If we go to war with Great Xia, I'm afraid it will be very difficult to buy it from the Yun nation and the Qin nation. The Empress turned her head and looked at Renbao. Her eyes were filled with vigor as she waited for his reply. For the first time, the word yes was added to her words. I want this and I want this. Even though there was only a difference of one word, the feeling it gave off was very different. Renbao hesitated for a while and said, I know a place that can produce salt. It's on Nine Peaks Mountain in the southwest of Lan City. I heard that there's a poisonous black pond there that can be filtered to produce well salt. However, I don't have much confidence in this matter, so I didn't tell you. I originally wanted to talk about this matter after the sweet potatoes are ripe. If you can do what you said, I will remember your great merit. After we return and settle the matter of the iron ore mine, we will settle this first. If we can produce salt, we will have less apprehension in the future and won't have to worry about other things when we go to war with Great Xia. After all, if the commoners don't have salt to eat, they won't be able to survive, the Empress said as she looked at Renbao. I understand. I will do my best to settle these matters. Renbao nodded. The Empress carefully looked into his eyes and nodded her head. The two of them continued to move forward. Even though they didn't pay attention, many people nearby were looking at them. Or rather, they were looking at the Empress. This is a toothbrush and toothpaste for brushing teeth. There's no need to use willow twigs. This is a shower gel and shampoo. Renbao was putting the things into the cart as he pushed the cart. These were all things that he prepared for the Empress. At this moment, he really felt like a couple shopping in a supermarket. If they did this often, it wouldn't be too bad. Regardless of whether it was the daily necessities or the food, there were many different brands. The variety made the Empress exclaim in admiration. The variety of goods in Dayo was really too little and couldn't be compared at all. Finally, the two of them picked some fruits and vegetables that the Empress was interested in before paying the bill and leaving. A few men who had been following them and looking at them from afar felt a little lost. Their hearts were filled with envy, jealousy, and hatred for Renbao. After walking one round in the supermarket, the Empress had a clearer understanding of the abundance and variety of goods on earth. At the same time, she also observed the appearance of the ordinary people in the supermarket. Indeed, just like what Renbao said, they were living a rich life. She could feel the disparity between them and this made her a little envious. No matter which emperor it was, they all hoped that their country would become like this. When the two of them sat in the cart, Renbao laughed and said, It seems like I'm not the only one who thinks that you are a fairy. Just now, many people felt the same way. Many of them were looking at us, but in fact, they were looking at you. I don't know if I should dig their eyes out. This was half a joke and half a truth. The Empress tilted her head and looked at him. Do you really think so? Renbao nodded. Then don't lie to me in the future. After saying this, the Empress turned her face outside the window. This wasn't the first time she said that she didn't like to be lied to and was even a little worried about being lied to. When she said such words, it always made people feel that she wasn't like what she looked like on the outside. She was actually very meticulous. Even though she gave people the impression that she was overbearing, tyrannical, dignified, and cold. Renbao felt that there was a hidden meaning in her words this time around. He was silent for a while and didn't know if it was his misconception. He couldn't help but think of the monk's words, a sharp tongue is just a small trick. Only sincerity can be exchanged for sincerity. His heart trembled slightly, but he said, Your Majesty, there's a type of bird in this world that never lands on the ground from birth. It keeps flying in the sky and only lands on the ground when it dies. It's the same for me. Ever since I met Your Majesty, I have been chasing after Your Majesty's brilliance. I won't stop until I die, just like that kind of bird that pursues the sky. The difference between us is that even if I die, even if I'm in the netherworld, I will still raise my head and look up at your majesty. No one has ever said such words to me before. I will believe it. The Empress was silent for a while and sighed softly. At this moment, her mind was in a mess. She wanted to slap this fellow who was disturbing her state of mind to death. It seemed like a very simple thing, but she couldn't lift her palm no matter how hard she tried. This wasn't the first time. It was the same for her the last time. However, she couldn't lift her palm both times. She didn't know why she said such weak words. She only felt that her heart was trembling. Renbochin tilted his head and looked at the Empress, who had turned her head to look outside. At this moment, the Empress gave Renbochin the feeling of a fairy that had descended to the mortal world. It gave him an indescribable impulse. It was even more intense than when he was in that room in the afternoon. This is arranged by heaven. Heaven is the greatest. Renbochin finally said this sentence. He was saying this to the Empress as well as himself. Chapter 148. His Majesty hasn't been found yet. If there's any news, we'll send it back immediately. In a mansion, two old men sat opposite each other. One of them frowned slightly. That demon should have been killed long ago. Otherwise, such a thing wouldn't have happened. If anything were to happen to His Majesty, the consequences would be unimaginable. The one who spoke was Junior Elder Zhikohai. Opposite him was the Great Elder, Shurqing. His eyes were shut and his face was filled with worry. The disappearance of the Empress was too big of a deal. Even though Axayanja was suppressing it, as time passed, the others also felt that something was amiss. In the evening, these two big shots entered the palace together. Only then did they realize that Axayanja actually dared to suppress such a huge matter. At this time, the monitoring division was conducting a massive search in the city. The left army had also been mobilized to search the vicinity of Lawn City. Such a big move had already aroused many people's suspicions. This matter could at most be suppressed for another day. If Her Majesty could not be found by noon tomorrow, it would really be a mess. I think we should inform the General-in-Chief who supports the nation about this, Zhikohai said after thinking for a long time. There's no need for that now. If we can't find His Majesty by noon tomorrow, we'll have to inform the General-in-Chief who supports the nation to make preparations, Shurqing sighed. Axayanja also deserves to die. She was protecting Her Majesty, but Her Majesty went missing in the palace. Yet, she still tried in vain to suppress the matter and hide it. Damn it. If it wasn't for the fact that she still had to lead the palace guards in the search, she would have been thrown into prison first. It was His Majesty who insisted on beheading her in public, Zhikohai continued. Shurqing continued to close his eyes in silence. Now, his eyebrows were almost twisted into a fried dough twist, and his already wrinkled face looked even older. The two of them sat facing each other from late at night until dawn. Zhikohai stood up and said, "An entire night has passed, and there's still no news. It's best to prepare early." Shurqing, who had been sitting there all this while, suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes shone brightly as he asked, "What are you doing?" Zhikohai lowered his head to look at Shurqing and said, "If His Majesty is not found by today, then someone will definitely find out and there will be chaos. We should prepare for this matter as soon as possible." Shurqing stared at him for a long time before closing his eyes again. Zhikohai left the house and snorted coldly after getting into the car. His Majesty had been missing for a day and a night in the palace. It was possible that he would never return. If they still couldn't find His Majesty after a few days, they could ask that person to come back. At this moment, there were still a few guards standing guard in Yangxin Palace Hall. As the air in the hall suddenly distorted, two people suddenly appeared here. Who? Your Majesty. When the guards saw the two people in the hall, they were overjoyed and knelt on one knee. The ones who appeared in the hall were naturally Renbochin and the Empress. Renbochin was wearing a pair of casual pants and a shirt. The Empress was wearing a long red dress, but she had already changed into a new one. The Empress released her grip on Renbochin's hand, turned around, took a few steps back to the couch, and sat down. She then asked coldly, "How long have I been gone?" "Your Majesty, it has already been 20 hours. What happened? Where are Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan? Call Axianzhou over as well." After the Empress spoke, the imperial guards below immediately responded, and two of them hurriedly ran out. The remaining two told her some things that they knew. For example, Axianzhou ordered all the imperial guards to search the palace. At the same time, she suppressed the news and let the Department of Inspection conduct a large-scale search in Lan City. However, because the movement was too big, it attracted the attention of the two elders. After discovering that the Empress was missing, she informed the left army to search outside the city. Also, Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan were locked up in the side hall and were guarded. In short, the day that the Empress went missing had alarmed many people. After all, with her status, every move of hers would set off a lot of waves, let alone a matter like her disappearance. After a while, Axianzhou walked into the hall in big strides wearing her helmet and armor. Her face was full of joy. "Greetings, Your Majesty." The Empress nodded slightly and said, "Well done. Get someone to inform the Great Elder and Junior Elder to enter the palace. Get the left army and the Department of Inspection to stop as well. Get Keyong and Lei Yu to see me. In addition, all of you are dismissed." "Yes, Your Majesty. I will take my leave." Axianzhou and the other two imperial guards responded and strode away. After they left, the Empress looked at Renbochin and said in a slightly gentler voice, "You should go back and rest. Don't delay your cultivation." "Your Majesty, I will take my leave." After Renbochin finished speaking to the Empress, he turned around and left the palace. Not long after, he met Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan, who were rushing over. They glared at him fiercely. He actually went missing with the Empress and even implicated the two of them. It wasn't to the extent of feeling aggrieved, but they were somewhat resentful towards Renbochin. On the contrary, Renbochin returned to Pingle Park with a good-natured smile on his face. He only sighed when he returned to his room. During these 2 days on Earth, the Empress had become much gentler. Renbochin could see her envy, uneasiness, curiosity, and various other emotions. She was becoming more and more like an ordinary person. However, after returning to Deo, she had reverted back to her original high and mighty Empress. On the contrary, Renbochin felt that the Empress, who was dressed in red, sitting on the sofa, eating ice cream and watching the news while he was cooking breakfast in the kitchen, was much more likable to him. This dignified and cold Empress always made him feel extremely pressured. After dispelling the thoughts in his mind, Renbochin calculated the time taken for this round trip. It was 2.5 days on Earth, which was equivalent to 20 hours here. Renbochin was prepared to see how long he could stay in this world if he didn't take the initiative to go back. After sitting on the bed for a while, Renbochin threw these distracting thoughts aside and immersed his mind into the visualization of water, of re-visualization. Once again, he appeared beside that lake. Not many people knew about the disappearance of the Empress. Most people only knew that the husband chosen by the Empress had suddenly gone missing in the palace. The Department of Inspection had conducted a massive search in the city and stopped after a day. It was said that they had found him. Shi Qing heaved a sigh of relief upon hearing the news of the Empress's return. The wrinkles on his face had also smoothed out. When Jikohai heard this news, he was stunned for a long time. In the end, he entered the palace without saying a word to the Empress. When he arrived at the palace gate, he already saw Shi Qing's car parked there. "Your Majesty is back." Shi Qing smiled meaningfully at Zhikohai. "This is great news. I am also relieved." Zhikohai smiled as well. Both of them entered the palace together to see the Empress. "I wonder where did Your Majesty go this time?" Shi Qing immediately asked after seeing the Empress. "A rather interesting place," the Empress replied casually. To her, Earth was indeed very interesting. Civilization, prosperity, and extremely powerful machines. This was her biggest impression of Earth. She hoped that one day, Deo could also be like this. "I shouldn't interfere with Your Majesty's whereabouts. However, I feel that it's better to inform Your Majesty first if you have any matters to attend to next time. Furthermore, you shouldn't travel alone," Shi Qing continued. "I understand. You don't have to think too much about this matter." The Empress waved her hand. "I called both of you here to inform you that I'm fine. If there's nothing else, both of you may leave. Your Majesty's disappearance this time has caused a great impact. Everyone in the palace is in a state of panic. Before this, Your Majesty has never been in such a state. Furthermore, it's not possible for someone to suddenly disappear from the palace. I believe that Rinpoche used demonic magic to bewitch Your Majesty. Your Majesty, please kill this person and choose another husband," Zhikohai suddenly said. Chapter 149. Your Majesty, please kill this man and choose another husband, Zhikohai suddenly said. The Empress narrowed her eyes and a cold glint flickered in her eyes. The next second, the Empress appeared in front of Zhikohai, grabbed him by the throat, and lifted him up. Your Majesty, please show mercy. Shi Qing's expression changed. Although he didn't like Zhikohai, he couldn't let him die. The Empress carried Zhikohai and stared into his eyes until his face turned red and he was almost out of breath. Only then did she casually throw him aside. "It's none of your business to meddle in my affairs. You may leave," the Empress said coldly and turned back to her couch. Zhikohai covered his throat as he gasped for air. Then, he got up, bowed to the Empress, and left. Outside the palace, Shi Qing looked at Zhikohai and asked, "Why did you say that? His Majesty's private affairs are not for us to interfere." This was something he could not understand. This is no longer a private matter. He has bewitched His Majesty in the palace and will inevitably cause a great disaster in the future. I feel that even if Your Majesty doesn't like it, as a subject, I still have to remind Your Majesty, Zhikohai said. Shi Qing looked at Zhikohai, not saying a word for a long time. He didn't believe Zhikohai's words. The person in front of him was the one who disliked the Empress the most. The person with the most complicated thoughts was also the person in front of him. Sometimes, Shi Qing even felt that he was just wearing the skin of an aboriginal. Shi Qing would never believe that he was doing this for the good of His Majesty, risking his life and risking the wrath of His Majesty. So what was his goal? Watching Zhikohai get into the car and leave, Shi Qing stood there for a long time before he shook his head slightly and stopped thinking about him. He had too many thoughts on his mind. However, where exactly did Her Majesty and storyteller Rin go? He was also extremely curious. He just knew that if His Majesty wanted to tell him, he would naturally know. If His Majesty didn't want to say it, then there was no need for him to ask. The Empress sighed a long time after the two of them had left. Your Majesty, what's wrong? Is something bothering you? Hong Wuan took a few steps forward and massaged the Empress's shoulders. Pour some wine for me, the Empress ordered. Although it was early in the morning, she still felt that it was in the evening before they returned. She liked to drink. She could suppress everything. This was her way of soothing her mood. whether it was when he was bored or when he had something on his mind. At this moment, her heart was in a mess. After Renbochin was done with the visualization of water, he slept in his room for the entire morning. He only woke up when the maid who delivered the vegetables knocked on his door. Renbochin waited for her to leave before he sat down at the table. Before he even picked up his chopsticks, he could already smell that something was amiss. There were familiar spices and familiar dishes. This was prepared by the Imperial Kitchen. Previously, the Imperial Kitchen was only in charge of the Empress's meals. Everyone else, including Renbochin, was in charge of another organization. Was this arranged by the Empress? Renbochin thought. Other than this, there was no other explanation. From this, it could be seen that the treatment he received this time was indeed different. When he thought of the Empress, many complicated and indescribable feelings welled up in his heart. What a pity, I didn't expect that she would really come back this time. I didn't even bring anything with me. Maybe next time. Renbochin thought of the pile of clothes and snacks that he bought for the Empress and found it somewhat funny. The Empress loved to say, "I want this." Compared to "I want this," it was less domineering and more gentle. After Renbochin finished his meal, he got up and went to Qingxin Palace Hall. It was better for him to learn how to read first. After entering, Renbochin immediately threw a handful of candies on the table. The originally drowsy Lin Chaola immediately became spirited. She looked at Renbochin with her bright eyes, just like a husky begging for food. Continue to teach me how to read. Today, I will use a different method. Tell me word by word and I will go back to practice by myself, Renbochin said. Sure. Lin Chaola nodded her head. However, not long after, she sensed that something was amiss. Even though Renbochin didn't know the language here, he would usually use a language that he couldn't understand to record. This let Lin Chaola know that he was actually literate, just that he didn't know the language of Great Xia. That's right, the language used in Dayo was Great Xia's language. Even though the Aboriginals also had a language, it was limited and completely insufficient to express themselves. Today, Renbochin didn't use the stupid method of slowly practicing word by word. He directly asked for a word and wrote a note at the back. This way, it wouldn't take long for him to learn everything that he knew. When that time came, he wouldn't be able to use her, and where would she find candies? I don't want to teach anymore. Lin Chaola immediately pushed the table and leaned back. Her face was filled with unhappiness. What's wrong? Renbochin raised his head and saw that she was throwing a tantrum. If I teach like this, I will learn it in less than 5 days, Lin Chaola mumbled. Renbochin was amused to see her like this. He didn't even need to think to know what she was thinking. I will bring you more next time. In the future, I will open a shop that specializes in selling candies. Your salary will definitely be enough, right? After hearing what he said, Lin Chaola's worries turned into joy. You are right, I want 10 times more candies tomorrow. Sure. Renbochin felt that this little girl was too easy to fool. In any case, he only had a few more days to learn. Furthermore, his current status was different, and he didn't need to be as careful as before. As such, he didn't really care about these things. Previously, he brought some candies with him and gave them to the Empress. There were still some left. In one afternoon, Renbochin memorized more than 300 characters. He had also learned quite a lot previously. In another 5 to 6 days, he would be able to memorize all of them. At the same time, he had an idea. When he returned to Yangxin Palace Hall, he would create a comparison table between this character and Chinese characters. At that time, he would hire a few programmers to create a comparison software that could directly translate the Chinese characters from the book. This would save him a lot of trouble. After leaving Qingxin Palace Hall, Just as he reached the entrance of Pingle Park, the imperial bodyguard called out to him, "Storyteller Ren, Her Majesty summons you to Yangshin Palace Hall to accompany her for a meal." Ren Boqian nodded his head. He placed the notebook that was filled with annotations back in his room before heading to Yangshin Palace Hall to meet Her Majesty. As always, it was cold and empty. The Empress had changed back to her usual red muslin dress and a white undergarment. She sat alone on the couch with a table in front of her. There were 4 dishes and a soup on it. There was also a chair in front of the table. "Your Majesty." Ren Boqian greeted her. He looked around and didn't see Qin Yuan or Hong Wuan. The Empress was the only one in the empty palace hall. "Have a seat." When the Empress saw Ren Boqian's arrival, she felt a little happy. Her heart was moved a few times, but she eventually said, "Have a seat." Indeed, this was the Empress. Ren Boqian thought as he sat down. During the meal, the two of them didn't speak anymore. Ren Boqian always moved the dishes that the Empress wanted to eat in front of her. This made her feel warmth flowing in her heart. The same thing, done by different people, gave her different feelings. After dinner, the Empress asked, "When are you preparing to set off?" Ren Boqian understood that she was talking about the iron ore mine. This matter had always been the top priority in her heart. Chapter 150. Friendly reminder, the original chapters 145 and 146 have become 146 and 147. The contents of the original chapter 145 have been changed. One more chapter has been added. "Your Majesty, please kill this man and choose another husband," Shikohai suddenly said. The Empress narrowed her eyes and a cold glint flickered in her eyes. The next second, the Empress appeared in front of Shikohai, grabbed him by the throat, and lifted him up. "Your Majesty, please show mercy." Shi Qing's expression changed. Although he didn't like Shikohai, he couldn't let him die. The Empress carried Shikohai and stared into his eyes until his face turned red and he was almost out of breath. Only then did she casually throw him aside. "It's none of your business to meddle in my affairs. You may leave," the Empress said coldly and turned back to her couch. Shikohai covered his throat as he gasped for air. Then, he got up, bowed to the Empress, and left. Outside the palace, Shi Qing looked at Shikohai and asked, "Why did you say that?" "His Majesty's private affairs are not for us to interfere." This was something he could not understand. This is no longer a private matter. He has bewitched His Majesty in the palace and will inevitably cause a great disaster in the future. "I feel that even if Your Majesty doesn't like it, as a subject, I still have to remind Your Majesty," Shikohai said. Shi Qing looked at Shikohai, not saying a word for a long time. He didn't believe Shikohai's words. The person in front of him was the one who disliked the Empress the most. The person with the most complicated thoughts was also the person in front of him. Sometimes, Shi Qing even felt that he was just wearing the skin of an aboriginal. Shi Qing would never believe that he was doing this for the good of His Majesty, risking his own life and risking the wrath of His Majesty. So what was his goal? Watching Shikohai get into the car and leave, Shi Qing stood there for a long time before he shook his head slightly and stopped thinking about him. He had too many thoughts on his mind. However, where exactly did Her Majesty and Storyteller Ren go? He was also extremely curious. He just knew that if His Majesty wanted to tell him, he would naturally know. If His Majesty didn't want to say it, then there was no need for him to ask. The Empress sighed a long time after the two of them had left. "Your Majesty, what's wrong? Is something bothering you?" Hong Wuan took a few steps forward and massaged the Empress's shoulders. "Pour some wine for me," the Empress ordered. Although it was early in the morning, she still felt that it was in the evening before they returned. She liked to drink. She could suppress everything. This was her way of soothing her mood. Especially when his heart was in a mess. At this moment, her heart was in a mess. After Renbochin was done with the visualization of water, he slept in his room for the entire morning. He only woke up when the maid who delivered the vegetables knocked on his door. Renbochin waited for her to leave before he sat down at the table. Before he even picked up his chopsticks, he could already smell that something was amiss. There were familiar spices and familiar dishes. This was prepared by the Imperial Kitchen. Previously, the Imperial Kitchen was only in charge of the Empress's meals. Everyone else, including Renbochin, was in charge of another organization. Was this arranged by the Empress? Renbochin thought. Other than this, there was no other explanation. From this, it could be seen that the treatment he received this time was indeed different. When he thought of the Empress, many complicated and indescribable feelings welled up in his heart. What a pity, I didn't expect that she would really come back this time. I didn't even bring anything with me. Maybe next time. Renbochin thought of the pile of clothes and snacks that he bought for the Empress and found it somewhat funny. The Empress liked to say the most, "I want this." Compared to "I want this," it was less overbearing and more gentle. After Renbochin finished his meal, he got up and went to Qingxin Palace Hall. It was better for him to learn how to read first. After entering, Renbochin immediately threw a handful of candies on the table. The originally drowsy Lin Chaola immediately became spirited. She looked at Renbochin with her bright eyes, just like a husky begging for food. Continue to teach me how to read. Today, I will use a different method. Tell me word by word and I will go back to practice by myself, Renbochin said. Sure. Lin Chaola nodded her head. However, not long after, she sensed that something was wrong. Even though Renbochin didn't know the language here, he would usually use a language that he didn't understand to record down. This made Lin Chaola know that he was actually literate, just that he didn't know the language of Great Xia. That's right, the language used in Dayo was Great Xia's language. Even though the Aboriginals also had a language, it was limited and completely insufficient to express themselves. Today, Renbochin didn't use the stupid method of slowly practicing word by word. He directly asked for a word and wrote a note at the back. This way, he would learn everything that she knew in no time. When that time came, he wouldn't be able to use her anymore. How would she get candies then? I don't want to teach anymore. Lin Chaola immediately pushed the table and leaned back. Her face was filled with unhappiness. What's wrong? Renbochin raised his head and saw her throwing a tantrum. If I teach like this, I will learn it in less than 5 days, Lin Chaola mumbled. Renbochin was amused to see her like this. He didn't even need to think to know what she was thinking. I will bring you more next time. In the future, I will open a shop that specializes in selling candies. Your salary will definitely be enough, right? After hearing what he said, Lin Chaola's worries turned into joy. You are right. I want 10 times more candies tomorrow. Sure. Renbochin felt that this little girl was too easy to fool. In any case, he only had a few more days to learn. Furthermore, his current status was different. He didn't need to be as careful as before. As such, he didn't really care about these things. After taking out the ones that he brought with him and giving them to the Empress, there were still some left. In one afternoon, Renbochin memorized more than 300 words. He had also learned quite a lot previously. In another 5 to 6 days, he would be able to memorize all of them. At the same time, he had an idea. When he returned to Yangxin Palace Hall, he would make a comparison table between this word and Chinese characters. At that time, he would hire a few programmers to make a comparison software that could directly translate the Chinese characters from the book. This would save him a lot of trouble. After leaving Qingshin Palace Hall and arriving at the entrance of Pingle Park, the Imperial Guard called out to him, "Storyteller Ren, Her Majesty summons you to Yangxin Palace Hall to accompany her for a meal." Ren Baqian nodded his head. He first placed the note that was filled with annotations back in his room before going to Yangxin Palace Hall to see Her Majesty. It was as cold and empty as ever. The Empress had changed back to her usual red muslin dress and white undergarment. She sat alone on the couch with a table in front of her. There were 4 dishes and a soup on it. There was also a chair in front of the table. "Your Majesty." Ren Baqian greeted her. He looked around and didn't see Qin Yuan and Hong Wuan. The Empress was the only one in the empty hall. "Have a seat." When the Empress saw Ren Baqian's arrival, she felt a little happy. Her heart was moved a few times, but in the end, she only said, "Have a seat." Indeed, this was the Empress. Ren Baqian thought to himself as he sat down. During the meal, the two of them didn't speak anymore. Ren Baqian always moved the dishes that the Empress wanted to eat in front of her. This made her feel warm in her heart. The same thing, done by different people, gave her different feelings. After dinner, the Empress asked, "When are you preparing to set off?" Ren Baqian understood that she was talking about the iron ore mine. This matter had always been the top priority in her heart. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.